Hi, good evening, everyone. I guess we're officially starting the land use zoning, public and private housing committee. Welcome. We're doing it over Zoom. We have a pretty packed agenda today, so we should start out, with doing, approval of the minutes, and then afterwards we'll do the roll call, the opening roll call. Right? That's the order, right?
Yeah, I was to say if there's no changes to the minutes, they're considered.
So I did send everyone the minutes. Did you all get a chance to look at them? Are there any changes to the minutes? There's no changes? All right, so then we can move forward. And then, tell me your name.
Ariadna.
Ariadna, sorry, Ariadna. So, we can do, if you're taking attendance, and typically you do the roll call.
Yeah, I still haven't received the document.
Did you CC?
What? No, I didn't CC you, but you got them a week ago.
Okay.
From DD
Yes,
Stars.
no, but I just want you to know if you did it now, so I can put it on you. Otherwise. Give her a minute to see if she gets it.
Let me pull up.
You got it on your phone?
These are the ones from last Monday.
Pardon?
These are the ones from last month that have a minute, so I can just use that.
Okay.
Okay, I can begin with roll call.
Okay,
Ramirez,
here, present.
Ariadna, present, Alistair,
Yes.
Andrea. Herman Hewitt. Here, Trevor Holland. Laura Lugo. Jaylene. Sandra.
Yeah.
John,
Yes.
Steve,
Here.
Megan, Anisha.
Okay. All right, we're all done with our roll call, so, yeah,
No, just trying to find out if I was to the housing committee. I didn't hear it on the agenda.
Oh, I included you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
all right. So, the first item on the agenda is, DDC, presenting, and they are on Zoom, is that correct?
They should be.
That's correct.
All right,
We're here on Zoom, but we have a few people that are presenting. That's on the, can you guys, John, Kenya, can you guys switch over to be a panelist? So you
Sure.
can do video on and.
Yeah.
So who am I?
Carl, why don't you sit there and make everyone a
Kenya
panelist?
And John Fantillis are on the DDC team to present to you guys.
Sorry, John Quintillis and who else?
Kenya on the waiting room, on the list attendees right now.
Cyril as well.
I see John is on. You're good. Hey, John.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. I guess I will share my screen, which is the presentation, if that's okay.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
We
I
can
can't.
hear you, Kenya.
Great. So I'm not sure if you can see me, but I guess I'll just go ahead and introduce the team if that's okay. All
Yes,
right.
go for it.
Okay, great. Yeah, so my name is Kenya Peralta. I am the DDC project manager for the current capital project we're presenting. It's in design. It is to reconstruct the facade at 122 Community Center's headquarters at 151st Avenue. And joining me today is the DDC design consultant, H3 architect John Fantillis, and also Kathy Cullen is joining us as well. She's the executive director for 122CC. So yeah, we'll present our current design as is in an effort to inform the committee and constituents of this upcoming project and hopefully receive a letter of resolution whenever it's available. So, John, whenever you can, I don't know if you can share screen or
If the moderator can allow me to share my screen.
Yeah, if you
Just,
make him a co-host and that way you can share screen. You know how to do that?
yes,
Okay.
all right. Should be a co-host now.
Okay, you should be able to share now.
All right, great. Can you see the title slide, H3 122cc
Yeah.
facade
Yeah.
reconstruction? All right, great. Thank you, everybody. Manhattan Community Board 3. My name is John Fontillis. I'm with the architectural firm H3. We were engaged by DDC to look at a restoration for the facade at the 122cc. And I apologize, all of those who live in the neighborhood probably know it better as PS 122. A very storied art center in your neighborhood. I've gotten to know it pretty well over the past couple of months. Kathy Cullen is the facility director. I don't know, Kathy, if you wanted to say a brief word.
Yeah, we sent it to you today, but we'll put it on the screen afterward. That's okay.
I'm not sure if Kathy's on. Well, let me just keep going, and then if there are any questions for Kathy, we can perhaps bring her on board at the end. There are 7 main pieces to the work that we're going to do at 122cc. Most of it is on the facade. It starts off with a restoration of the brownstone and mortar that's across the facade. A second major piece is to repair some of the cast stone coping at the roof, as well as clean some of the efflorescence, which is staining on the brick masonry that's happened over time because of water intrusion into the exterior wall. There are some small elements to the window mullion caps that we will restore, but a more major piece is window lintels across the 4th floor have eroded because of water infiltration. We will have to repair that area up there as well as replace some of those lintels. We are going to restore the west portico roof, which is on First Avenue. It's not used as a major entry now, but it has weathered over time, and there are parts of it that we feel need to be made safe in order for it to continue use over time. A 5th item is to install a code metal railing at the roof in order for maintenance to occur up on the top floor, the roof area. There is very much of a parapet up there. We need to fix that portion. We will also install some roof pavers in the area of the exit on the top floor. And then lastly, to fix some of the conditions of the brick at the parapet. Nothing is of any danger, but there are parts that of the brick are loose, and we do need to remedy that situation. This is the site at the corner of 9th Street and First Avenue. This is the building. The short history, as you all know, it was a public school until about the late 70s, early 80s. It was abandoned for a few years, and then several arts groups came in to reoccupy it and used it to great effect of using some of the existing spaces as places to present art, both performing art as well as fine art. And it has become a center for art here in the East Village for the past 30, 40 years. Over time, as you can see, it started off as a public school, PS 122, built in 1894. Over time, it's lost some of its decorative elements. There was a major window replacement that was done in 2008. The windows are actually in pretty good condition. And then there was a interior renovation in 2018 that was completed that created additional spaces on the inside for presentation of art as well as artist studios. So the scope that we have before us this year is to look at the exterior, the areas that were not touched in 2008 or 2017, and bring that all up to a state of good repair. As I mentioned, it's 7 areas on the facade, mostly the masonry and areas around the windows to make sure that they're in good service and are maintained for the next 50 years. Here's some photographs of the facade. You can see here in this top right photograph some of the staining that's happening underneath the coping. That's due to a lot of water intrusion that's coming in through the coping, getting into the wall and leaching out from the masonry. You can see it all the way around the perimeter here. Here's that First Avenue portico. Some of the slates, the original slates, have fallen off, and the structure really does need to be restored and made clean. There's been a lot of damage to the original stucco finish, the plaster finish along this portico pyramid here on the front of the building. Around the perimeter of the windows, you do see some areas where the plaster that is forming this white finish has spalled off. What we've uncovered in doing some initial probes is that the underlying brownstone underneath has weathered to the point where it is weak in plane and will need to be repaired or reconstructed in order for the finish to be maintained. So we will be doing significant work around all of the windows in order to make sure that those elements can stay in place. You can see here on 9th Street areas, as I mentioned, the brownstone and the plaster are very weak. Areas have popped off. There is a condition here at this lintel that needs to be repaired, and it's sort of across the facade. There is no real rhyme or reason other than this is sort of the first time we've ever been able to really get into the exterior wall and determine the issues relative to water infiltration, as well as the condition of the masonry across the board. So we've developed with DDC a series of repairs across the facade. You can see a lot of it is just minor repairs at each one of the window enframelents, but in some areas, lintels will need to be replaced. Areas around the banding around the first floor will also need to be restored. And then on the 9th Street facade, large areas, we will need to go back in and replace those areas as well, and then repair some areas where water has gotten into the wall at the sill plate of the window.
And they immediately.
Our proposal is to go in with and remove the existing brownstone, mainly because its condition is very weak, and then replace it with a cast stone that is colored to match the existing. So instead of having a mortar or a stucco material, we would replace and dig out that brownstone and then replace it with a cast stone material that will have a very long life going forward, and we can color match it to make sure that the building doesn't have a lot of change from where it is now to after we're finished. And this is a very traditional way of repairing some of these traditional window enframelents. Cast stone is a pretty tried and true material that is used quite a bit in this type of restoration. At the roof, as I mentioned, we're seeing a lot of staining in the coping. We need to fix that, but better, we really do need to fix underneath the cast stone coping, the waterproofing and flashing, so that water doesn't drip through the coping into the exterior wall, which is the cause of all this staining that you're seeing here on the facade. And even small gaps like this can cause havoc when the water continuously can drip down into the exterior of the wall and thereby cause damage to the assembly. Here's the railing that I mentioned. As you can see, there's very little space here. We want to make sure that anybody who is working on the roof is safe. So we will replace this railing with an OSHA compliant railing so that it is anchored and people can work up here on the roof without fear of falling over. There's an area here that was supposed to receive some roof pavers during the 2018 renovation. It was value engineered out. We will put those in during this contract, essentially to protect a lot of the roof, which is right now just the roof membrane. And as you can see, a lot of wear and tear has been happening up on the roof. And then lastly, these issues with the brick masonry. Loose bricks will be pulled out, reset, and re-mortared in place so that we won't have a condition or an area where water may infiltrate into the facade. So when all is said and done, when we complete this work, it actually will not look very much different than what it does today. However, our hope is that that is a good thing, that all of the decorative banding and window enfranements will be done in cast stone and will be able to last for several more decades going forward. So I'll pause there, and if I don't know, Kathy, if you wanted just to mention a little bit about 122 and how this work fits into your mission.
Sure. So we are comprised, 122 Community Center is comprised of 5 organizations. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Thanks. One is Mabou Minds, which is a presenting organization that's been around forever. Philip Glass was a founding member. Ruth Malachek was another founder. And then Performance Space occupies the top 2 floors. They're also presenting organization with 2 theaters at their disposal. Also, we have 16 painter studios and an art gallery for the visual artists. And then we have on the bottom floor, we have Movement Research, which is a very respected dance and movement organization. They have studios for rehearsals on the bottom floor. And then finally, we have Alliance for Positive Change, and they help people who are HIV positive and more. And we have some counseling rooms in there for them. That's it. So there's a lot going on inside, and we're very grateful for being able to inhabit this building and for this project team to come in and help us maintain it as well. Thank you.
And I guess I'll leave it to Kenya for a last word.
I don't have any. So if anyone has any questions, or any comments, anything they want to add or say, any questions, we're here to answer them.
Lisa? Yeah, so we're about to start. So thank you for your presentation first. Thank you for sharing the details with us. 122 is a very important institution in our community. Before we begin, I just want to make sure if there's anybody here who wishes to speak from the public that you have signed a speaker card. Anybody?
Okay, so,
There's a speaker form, so
yeah,
if you want to
there's a
say
speaker
something in
form.
favor or in opposition, or you have a question, you fill out a speaker form. I'm hoping that everybody signed in. If not, if there are no questions, nobody from the public that wants to speak, yeah.
well, we also have public on Zoom, and they're in the
How many people do we have?
panelists. So if you can ask if anybody on Zoom would raise their Zoom hand, and Carl, if you could go to the panelists and when Damaris calls on them, you could promote them to panelists.
Okay, so if anyone on Zoom wishes to speak regarding this project, any questions, then please raise your hand. And then you will be promoted when it's your turn and given the floor to speak for 2 minutes on the issue. So we'll start first with the people who are present in the room. And if there's
Okay,
anybody in the room that wants to,
that Mr. Jenkins has a question.
okay, just a second. Thank you. What is she? Is she-
Okay.
Vincent has a question, and she's the interpreter.
Okay. So did she tell him to hold on? Okay. All right, so does anybody in the space have a question? All right, so let's move to the forward. Oh, first we do the public and then we do. Right, so we're gonna do the public on Zoom now. So if anybody, is anybody on staff? Oh.
Yeah.
Richard Moses, all right, so Richard Moses is our next speaker. Are you there, Richard?
Vincent, I think, wants to ask the question, right?
Vincent's not on stack though, so he should.
That's his interpreter.
Okay,
Oh,
Richard
so-
is his interpreter?
No, the woman there is the interpreter.
Okay,
So
Let's
if you could call on her.
all right, let's let her ask the question for Vincent and then we'll move on to Richard.
So we can't hear her. Is she muted?
Not yet,
Give
she's,
me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, hi, my name is Vincent Jenkins. I'm deaf. So how long will that building take for renovations and restoration?
I'll wait for him to finish before I answer.
The building's been there for a long time.
we're just gonna ask the public to be patient. Interpretation takes a little longer than speaking.
It's a beautiful building. Yeah, so the question is, I'm just curious as how long will it take for renovations and construction?
I can answer that one. This is Kenya, the project manager from the Department of Design and Construction. So as of right now, the current estimate that we have is it will take about 650 consecutive calendar days for construction. And that just means one day after another.
Okay,
When did the construction start?
it hasn't started yet.
What's the value of how much is it gonna cost to do this renovation and construction?
So Kenya, can you answer that?
I can. So we don't have the full. So right now we're still in design, and this is our this is our most developed design. So we don't have a concrete number for the full cost yet. We don't have that until the design is complete, including all details. We can share that eventually once we get to that phase.
Okay. Thank you, Kenya. So, Maria, does he have another question? Otherwise, we're gonna move on to the next speaker. I'll allow another question because there are-
Yes, there's one more question.
I just once again want to thank the public for their patience and the committee members. It's important to make sure that our meetings are accessible, and that's what it means. Sometimes we just have to wait for other people and respect different forms of communication.
Okay, so my final question is, who decides the final, who's in charge of the final, like, part to actually start the construction? Are you gonna partner with those 5 organizations?
So this is a capital project. The who decides, I guess the question is, who decides the final design, maybe? So these projects are vetted out with much time and anticipation, considering budgetary constraints and considering what the needs are for the space. And this is actually not in our hands, the Department of Design and Construction. There's another department, in this case, the Department of Cultural Affairs. I'm sorry if I'm talking too fast.
No.
Oh, no. Okay. The Department of Cultural Affairs, this is more, they're the ones that prepare the necessary improvements that need to happen to cultural institutions. So it's kind of like a group effort. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, yeah. All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Kenya. And thank you,
Okay,
Vincent,
thank you.
for your interpretation. We're gonna move on to the next speaker, Richard Moses, are you there? Can you hear us, Richard? Richard, can you find him?
Is he a panelist?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Richard, thank you. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, hi, thank you. I'll be real quick. Thank you for a very nice presentation. It looks like a great project. My question is, has any consideration been given to restoring the missing cornice on the building, reconstructing it? It would make the building, I think, look a lot better.
This is John Fontillis, the architect. Yes, I would agree with you, but I think when they did the renovation in 2018, the portion that that represented the area of the parapet that the cornice was attached to was cut down relative to the height of the roof. So we can't put back the old cornice. However, the work that we're doing on the top at the coping, the sort of the top layer above the masonry, is intended to make sure that the wall is not intruded with more moisture or more water, which essentially was what a cornice does. It protects the wall from having a lot of water drip into it. So we are replacing that coping. We are restoring that. Our intent is that will be a repair or restoration that will allow the building to continue on for the next several generations. I think over time, the past 20 years, each one of these capital projects has tried to address critical issues on the building, which is, if I said earlier, over 70, 80 years, not much work had been done on it at all. So we're trying to address a lot of work that had been deferred. But I think once this work is completed, we will have addressed all the major issues in the building going forward.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And hopefully maybe one day the decorative cornice could be reinstated, if it's not part of this project. But thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you, Richard. Thank you, John and Kenya. So I don't know if there are any other people who want to speak. Are there any committee members who'd like to ask any questions? Anyone on staff?
I'd like to say something.
All right, so we have Herman, Steve, and Alistair. No, in that order, please.
You hear me speaking?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, you can speak.
Okay. I'm glad to see that the building is still useful as an art center. It was one of three school buildings that came up at that same time that the community was trying to use for community purposes. This building, the building on 9th Street, which was the only one sold, and the Clemente building. I just also want to correct something. That building was not entirely abandoned. Every time I listen to the stories that they give it, you know, I don't think it was not entirely abandoned. DOE moved out of it, but the building was used by community people. Also, for the longest time, there was a daycare center that was thrown out of that building in 2007.
No.
Okay, so they were thrown out of here in 2007. So I just want to correct the situation that the building was abandoned. It was never abandoned. Clemente survived the Giuliani stuff, but PS 60 on 9th Street was sold at auction. And I wish at that point we could be sitting here talking about that building the same way we're talking about this one.
I know, that's a sad part for everyone. Do you have any questions regarding this project, though, Norman?
No, it has to be repaired.
All right, thank you for your comments then. Steve, please.
Yeah, well, first I want to congratulate 122 for this project. I know from being in this building with other community and cultural groups that these capital projects can take a really long time. First of all, getting funding and then going through the development pipeline. So we work with DDC on several projects. So I'm not just happy to hear that this is moving forward. I have a question. Is this entirely funded by Reso A funding, or are there several other sources of funding? Do you feel that the project is fully funded? Because you mentioned that there may be, you don't have a final estimate of the cost, and I'm wondering what happens if the project doesn't, if there are cost overruns, are there any potential, things that might have to be scaled back in that event? Also, I'm not clear, is this in the historic district or is it a landmark building? Did you have to go through landmarks to get certificate of appropriateness?
It is not in a landmark district, and it's not a New York City landmark. We will go through the Public Design Commission, though, as a nature of a public project.
What about the question regarding the funding? Is this fully funded with Reso A? Do you know?
Yeah, so, actually, I'm not sure about Reso A.
Over what that means for the rest of the community.
Well,
I had the same question.
yeah, I mean, there's the city, you can apply for Resolution A funding as to the city council and the borough president. So those funds are usually typically I don't know if Cultural Affairs Agency is the agency overseeing this, but the administrator and DDC works on the design and the renovation.
I guess I can respond to the extent that I know. So this project is completely capitally funded with a capital budget. Any more specifics than that, I couldn't be able to tell you. I know it's not expense. I know it's capital. And as far as the construction cost, yeah, I mean, how can I say this? We are meant to stay within budget, and the moment that we don't, then several things can happen. Some scope can be scaled back. That's one option, and there are other methods to try and gain control again of the cost. So that's one, but there are other methods, it's possible to seek further funding if it's like an essential element to the design. But right now we don't have any of the two issues, so we're very grateful about that, and we'll try to keep it that way.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, it says that Mr. Vincent Jenkins has a question.
All right, he has to be on side.
Comment.
We'll note that he has a question, and when we come back around to committee members, we'll ask him. But now it's the turn for the committee members to speak. Alistair?
Thanks. Just from a procedural standpoint, I'm just curious, why is this in front of this committee? Because we're not changing use, we're not changing zoning, we're not changing the look of the building anyway. I appreciate the project there, but I'm just curious why it's in front of us. That's my first question. Second question is, could you give us an idea of the budget or a price, an estimate of the cost range on this project? And a third comment to you, John, is I've dealt with water intrusion a lot. And one of my recommendations to you would be, well, one thing that I've observed with old buildings is the bricks become porous over time. It's just a natural thing like bricks. And you can point and redo the cornice of the building, all that, but if you don't seal the building with a silicone sealing entirely, you're still going to get water intrusion in. And I've unfortunately experienced that and learned that the hard way. So if you're going to put scaffolding up, which I assume you are, and you're going to go through the cost of putting up the scaffolding and all that, silicone seal the building when you're done. And that will really prevent the water intrusion, but you're still going to get water intrusion through the porous bricks. So that's my comment, and then I had those further questions. Thanks.
All right, so Kenya, do you want to answer? And just for time considerations, they already said that they don't know how much the budget is yet because of the design. They don't know what the ultimate design is going to be. But can you answer any of the other questions that Alistair or?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can answer. The first, why are we presenting in front of community board? This is a publicly owned building, and it's part of the Public Design Commission process to first just show the residents, I guess, the community of projects that are coming down the pipeline, just for your knowledge, really. And I think it's just good procedure. So that's the first question. I'm sorry, what was the second one?
I think we answered.
Yes, okay, got it, yeah.
If you had any idea of the budget of a range, I mean, you might not know the actual cost, but is there a cost range that you're working with?
Yeah, I don't see why I couldn't say that. It's less than 5 million. That's the most specific I guess I can get to right now. But again, I mean, we do have our Office of Communications, and I know our team and your team do have conversations. I mean, if this is something that's important, I'm sure they can be able to give you that information as we get closer to final design.
Okay.
I have a question, Mayor.
All right, Sandra, another committee member, to be recognized.
As a preservationist, I really appreciate the level of care that you're taking with this building. I hope you do consider reinstalling the decorative cornices, though, that Richard mentioned. But my question is, I know it's the facade that's being worked on. Will any of the programs be disrupted during the process?
You want me to
Go ahead,
speak to that?
Yeah.
No. And that's the really good news. That was something that we were holding our breath about, that we may have to, once again, move out of the building or move out of the spaces. But John, through his magic, has said that everything will stay in place and we'll still be able to present as we do now. So we're ecstatic about that.
Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so if we don't have any more committee members, any more committee questions, are there any, I know Vincent still had a question. I'll allow another question before we go into discussing the resolution.
Okay. Okay, you're right. It's good that there is no interruptions that's happening. And so, yeah, he definitely worked his magic.
Okay. We're gonna give this, Maria,
So he
another
did-
before we wrap up, okay?
Yes. Do you think there's gonna be a delay with the building? Do you think there'll be any kind of delay or procrastination in the construction of the building?
If I could answer that, Kenya, the reason why, in a way, we've come to you early here in the process is that we wanted to make sure that we've uncovered any other issues that might be in terms of the schedule and with contractors' work. But I do want to say, when Kathy said that they will not have to move out, but there will be some local disruption based on where work is happening on the facade. So I think what our hope is that because we will be working on the facade all at the same time, from different parts, the building will be scaffolded. It will have workers at different areas all doing work at the same time. That our hope is that we can move through the construction process very cleanly, as opposed to doing some work, waiting for a while, and then doing more work. What we've proposed is a scope of work that hopefully can happen simultaneously, and thereby get the building restored and as quick as possible in order for 122 to continue on.
All right, great. I'm gonna stop the level of discussion there, and we're gonna move into the resolution.
We look forward to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we look forward to it.
So Carl's gonna put the resolution that is being proposed for tonight. Again, you heard from
We're very excited.
and can you mute her? All right, thank you. All right. Oh, she was talking to us? Okay, sorry. Thank you, Maria.
So they need to stop sharing screen, right?
Yeah,
I can.
he's gonna take care of it, so. Just give us a second.
So if I could just mention that the reason that they're here is anytime that they, city has to go to design commission, they must come to community board first. So that's the reason.
Thank you.
So procedurally, we do
Right.
this.
And it's a publicly owned building, so that's what qualifies it. All right, so it's a pretty cut and dry resolution. It pretty much just reiterates, and everyone can take a look at it on the screen, all the points that were presented here today. It's really straightforward. It's just asking for our support for the proposal that is going before DDC. Do we need to read it for the record?
Yeah, we should read it out loud.
All right, so does somebody want to volunteer to read this resolution? It does not have to be me. All right, so, okay, Carl's gonna do us the honor of reading the resolution for us.
Okay, so this is DDC request for Community Board 3, Manhattan, 122 Community Center facade reconstruction, 150 First Ave. Whereas 122 Community Center is a performance and theater arts space and community center, and whereas 122 Community Center is housed in former PS 122 and is home to the Alliance for Positive Change, Mabu Minds, Movement Research, Painting Space 122, and Performance Space New York. And whereas 122 Community Center is undergoing facade reconstruction, the scope of which includes 1, stone and restoration mortar, remove and replace all brownstone with new durable cast stone color matched to existing watercolor. 2, cast stone coping and brick masonry efflorescence. At roof coping, remove existing cast stone, install new membrane and self-adhered flashings, and reinstall the cast stone. 3, window lintels and beauty caps. Replace corroded fourth floor lintels and reinstall window beauty caps that have become dislodged. 4, west portico roof. Replace portico roof and subframing. Replace restoration mortar at columns and supporting structure. 5, code compliant metal railing at roof. installation of a code compliant parapet railing to provide fall protection and safety along 5th floor roof area. 6, installation of roof pavers, install precast roof pavers at the west roof area on the 5th floor to prevent damage to roof membrane. 7, brick masonry parapets at locations where existing brick is loose, remove face brick on the parapet, install brick ties that back up whites and reset the brick. And whereas the construction is anticipated to start in the spring of 2025 and take approximately 650 consecutive calendar days, completing in winter of 2026. Whereas 122 Community Center is an important part of CB3, housing theaters, art organizations, and community organizations that contribute positively to the neighborhood. Therefore, be it resolved that Community Board 3 supports DDC's proposed PV 788-FAC 122CC facade reconstruction.
Thank you, Carl. So if we don't have any objections to any of this language, if there's nothing to add to the resolution, I think we can introduce it now we need to vote on it, right? So can I have a second to, I'm sorry, a motion first?
Make a motion to approve.
And a second? All right, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? None, the motion passes. Congratulations, we're very excited to see 122 get the repair work that it needs and continue to be an important institution in our community. Thank you for coming before us. And if there are any significant changes that you think we should know, we welcome you back at a later date.
And I just ask, when you vote, did you capture each person's?
Did you capture each person's vote?
Oh, you just
Everyone
said
said
number.
yes.
It's just a number.
Everyone said yes.
Just a number.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that people that went to you.
All right, great. So we're gonna move on. Thank you, again, John and Kenya and anyone else who's here. If you're free to leave Zoom if you're not here for the next presentation, or you can hang out too and listen. It's fine with us. Next week, we're gonna be talking about the text amendment changes. And so who's here to present on behalf of the city? 7:30? Oh, yeah, it's not time
9
yet.
minutes
Right.
away.
So we got 9 minutes.
He's at Community Board 11. He's right there.
All right.
He's right there.
So let's take people through what's gonna happen. All right, we're gonna have another presentation that will also be via Zoom for us as well. It's regarding this new text change amendment. They're giving the presentation currently at another community board, and we are scheduled to start at 7:30. So procedurally, I'm not sure what we can do with this time.
Well, I have a couple of things, but first, if I could just talk a little bit about the text amendment. So the person who's presenting is not from the city. This is George James, who several community boards have hired to work on this citywide text amendment. He has worked for Community Board 3. He's an excellent consultant and works for boards. And he's giving us an unbiased view and telling us what to look at. The city will be presenting next month, so you might have questions that you'll develop from now. And then we will be voting in December. It's huge, I haven't gone through it, but it's 18 very large sections that will really impact our community.
Susan, do you know how long George says it's gonna take?
Well, he's been there about an hour. He had texted me that 7:30 looked likely. If you
All right,
want,
so can we move things around? Are we able to move things around on the agenda and talk a little bit about the district needs statement while we wait?
absolutely.
And can you also take this committee really quickly through the procedure of the district needs statement and the budgetary priorities, like what it is that we're doing here today and why? As briefly as you
Sure.
can. And there was a handout that was sent to everyone. I don't know if you had a chance to read it. I know it was dense, but Susan's gonna talk us through it a little bit so that we're clear, because this is a question that comes up all the time, even for me, all the
Right.
time.
Okay, and some people have heard it way too many times, but we have some newer members here also. So the community board is charter mandated once a year to vote on a district needs statement and budget priorities. We are voting for budget for the next fiscal year, which is going to start next July, so it's not current. We first do a district needs statement, which basically talks about what our unmet needs are in the district. It informs our budget priorities. This committee worked on it for several months during the summer, finalized it in July. So I think it was sent to everyone, wasn't it, or no? You didn't send it. Okay. I actually have copies. People.
I thought you were gonna distribute them, but I didn't.
Well, I mean, I can, and I was prepared to.
Thank you.
It's just that it's kind of long, so, I don't know that. But it has, this is basically what you saw last time and a few changes that were asked to be made. So now what we're looking at is capital and expense priorities that are important for our community for the next fiscal year. It's not necessarily, the capital are major projects like reconstructing a park, building a new fire station, and these are agency money. This is not city council discretionary funds. The expense priorities, and we get about 25, are programming from agencies, such as workforce development, such as outreach to homeless, such as social workers in NORCs or in schools. So it's salaries, it's programming, it's Meals on Wheels, all the really important things in our community. And we always have a very hard time because we have so many needs paring it down. So last year, what I prepared for the committee to be able to look at is we first took last year's priorities. And the community boards as a group meet with the agencies in September. It's usually district manager and the committee chair. I'm sorry, I'm just looking this. George is also supposed to be telling me when he's written. 10 more minutes. And we ask questions. We prepare agendas for the agencies. The agencies this committee votes on is Department of Buildings, HPD, and NYCHA. And I think that's it. That's it. So we met with those agencies. We got information. It's very difficult because the administration always wants them to say, everything's wonderful, we have everything we need, and then turns around and says, cut your budget. So we try very hard to get it. Sometimes we just ask questions like with HPD, the commissioner was there, and we said basically, what should we put in on the priorities to get more money for affordable housing? And, you know, they gave us a line to put, which we actually put last year, and we asked the same question. When we met with NYCHA, you know, they have their very long list of capital priorities. And we asked, how much weight do we have in ranking the priorities or in supporting these, because we have so many other needs also. And they told us that actually our support was necessary to help get those funds unlocked, you know, that they need support for that. When we voted for a number of priorities last year, the city response was go to your elected officials. But that's fine, you know, we need to also know, let our elected officials know where we want you know, the city and, you know, and their money spent. So I don't know if I covered it. Does it make sense? Is there anything I left out? Any questions?
So can you just procedurally tell us timeline, like the stage that we're at now, like what's left?
Yeah, sure. So we're voting this month on, and we must vote this month and send our priorities and district need to city planning at the end of this month. So we started working on it actually May, June, July. We worked on district needs. And then in June and July, I asked committees, do you have any questions for the agendas. I really got very few, but I did take what I heard in committees and put those on the agenda along with the other boards. We submit one set for the 12 Manhattan boards. So this month, right now, we're voting on the district needs, which is in front of you. And maybe you want to take that. And like I said, this was discussed and finalized. And we're also be discussing, we have, we'll put on the monitor, a draft district needs with information for you for the budget for the budget priorities, not district needs. So I don't know if you wanna.
Don't pull it up now.
Pardon?
Should we pull it up now?
Well, I think, I don't know if people wanna take a few minutes to read the district needs that they have in front of them, and then by then.
So just to be clear, so that everybody understands what is being asked of us. Does everybody understand what is being asked of you right now? Yeah, okay. In the rare chance that you don't. We're reading this to make sure that it is reflective of what we want to approve. And Susan pulled out, and what is on the screen, or what Carl shared with us a second ago, was last year's. Right?
Did you put?
Yeah, he did.
Do we want
Oh,
to-
yeah, it's both last year's plus some additional potential things for you to consider.
Right, so these issues are already reflected in here?
This is the need statement informs that.
Okay.
Informs that.
So
And
we're,
it doesn't have to be a direct.
so we're voting on the need statement
And the priorities.
and the budget priorities.
Yes, the only difference is the need statement was basically worked on so that we can this month focus on this.
Got it. So, any questions?
Is
Yeah.
there a hard copy of those priorities on it?
A physical hard copy? No, but there might be like we can probably send it to you digitally.
Okay, I'm just wondering.
I mean, unless you have a printout. Do you have a printout?
We're voting, yes, we do this, you do this every year.
I know this we're voting on.
We're voting on everything, but
Yes.
we worked on the district
Yeah.
needs for 3 months and finished that so that this month we can spend our time on the priorities.
Is that your question, Alistair?
So we're not voting on the priorities.
Yes, we are.
Yes, you're also voting on that. We're
Today.
voting on the statement,
Okay.
which is what captures all of it.
Right.
And then these are the actual line item budget priorities that we want to make sure are also considered and adopted or whatever. the
It
process
seems
is
like a
called.
lot, but you already spent 3 months.
Yeah,
on
no,
this.
I've
So,
seen
But
this
you never
before.
voted on it because
Yes.
we're not doing anything with it till this month.
So I'm gonna recommend procedurally, if we can take like a few minutes, I'm gonna give everyone a few minutes to read this and try to look at what you see on the screen. I mean, this is all pretty basic.
Is that the whole document or?
That is the budget only priorities, and this is the district.
No,
needs,
right, on the budget, that's the whole.
That's the whole thing,
Okay.
so that is stuff from last year that we think is still relevant this year with new proposed priorities for this year.
And I would recommend that when you're ready to go through that, we start at the top and go through each
Alright.
one.
I'm gonna have to
So-
sit closer.
Do people wanna let's take 2 minutes, read the district needs, and then we'll go to the budget priorities, and then I'm gonna ask you, Susan, to take us through that, okay? Is that cool with you? Is that
Yeah,
fine? Okay.
absolutely. I'm just,
All right,
I'm
so 2
just
minutes, let's start
watching,
now.
because when George is ready, we'll
Yeah,
have a
that's
break.
fine. I just wanna take advantage of the time, because nobody wants to be here longer than they
Absolutely.
have to be. All right, so 2 minutes, read the statement, and then we'll go through this, and just so that we know, when George is ready, we'll have to stop and then come back to it, okay?
I see he's still there.
So there are spinach pies, if anybody wants a spinach pie.
Thank you, my helpful thing.
It's a little bit of one.
The advantage of in-person meetings.
I got it.
You'll be able to see if George comes on, right?
I'm trying to just get my.
Sorry.
It's okay. This is not-
Yeah, I think we have enough water for everyone.
If not, I'll give you a bottle tomorrow.
No, that's fine, all right. It's very cheap.
Do folks need a few, another minute or so?
Yes.
The other thing I guess I should say that I didn't mention is that everything's been researched, particularly in the budget. So we know that it's city funding, not federal state. We know it's agency money, not discretionary money. We know it hasn't been funded. We check to make sure, because sometimes before it's built, it's funded. And Alistair, you asked if, if the funding was complete, I think, oh, Steve asked. They don't go into design until they have the funding. So we were making sure we didn't want to waste a priority on something that's already been funded. Is this a lot of old back to you, John?
Yeah. I mean, it's always affordable housing, the majority of it.
Okay. How we doing? I think can we move on now? Any objections? Okay, so Susan, take us away.
Okay, so
you each priority for us.
let's go to the top. Oh, this is the first one. I'm sorry. It says 18 because when we ranked them last year, this was number 18, but what we did is we took out everything that wasn't from this committee, we left it in the order. So there were two expense priorities from this committee last year. One was increased funding for staff for ground maintenance and building maintenance at NYCHA, which we all know is still very much needed. And the other one was increased funding for waste management staff and operations, which we discussed at the agency this year, and they still need that.
Oh, jeez.
What's that?
Just hit remind me
We
tomorrow.
did something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you go to the very bottom so I could look at the potential ones? Okay, so potential ones. So HPD, when we tried to pull out of them, what do you need? Said they need funding for preservation programs. And I think that would mean, I think Damaris and Steve could talk about it more, but I think it's particularly keeping existing affordable housing in shape and maintained so that we don't lose it. And then Manhattan inspectors, that was again for HPD. They have 18 vacancies for their inspectors, so funding for more inspectors. And then, I'm sorry. Let me just. Resolution. Okay, and then the last one is a NYCHA program. There is a pilot program. I don't know if you've been reading in the Times. It takes, I think, about a year to convert a vacant NYCHA apartment to be ready for a new family. And there is a pilot program called the Vacant Readiness Program, which greatly reduces the turnaround time. And what we would like, or what we're suggesting, is that this program be funded to expand it to all NYCHA developments. And then if you want to go back, those are all the expense, and I will go back into capital. This is the one I mentioned, we had talked to the HPD commissioner about, to increase city investment in development of affordable housing. The second one is capital repairs at, so when NYCHA community centers are used for youth or for senior programs, it's always a problem getting money to maintain at these very, very old buildings, because NYCHA doesn't have the money and the providers that are providing programs for either youth or seniors, their money is for programming, so they don't have capital money. So it is always really difficult to get money. That we have a senior program at 189 Allen in the Hernandez NYCHA development that for years has needed repairs with the ceiling leaking and just massive repairs. We actually did get Dan Goldman in there this year and to look at it to try and get federal money, but we also, want more city money for that. And then NYCHA has a whole list of reconstruction repairs that are needed. We took some off their list last year. They still need funding. And I don't know if you want to say anything about the NYCHA, you were at the NYCHA meeting, if there's anything you wanted to add about
I
that.
think this list is pretty long.
What?
I think we got a lot of stuff on this list. There's always gonna be things that we'll need to add, but I don't have anything that I think is pressing. to
Well,
add
if
other,
the new things that I'm suggesting, if you want to add those, you have to decide how you're gonna rank them, where you're gonna put it. Like funding for preservation programs to maintain affordable housing, HPD inspectors, and then the NYCHA program, which I think should be a really high ones.
Susan, could you give an example of what a preservation program to preserve affordable housing would be like?
Steve can do that.
Well, there's a few different programs. There's Stabilizing NYC, which funds, I believe, about 18 community organizations around the city to organize tenants associations, develop coalitions of tenants who have the same problem landlord, to prevent displacement, to connect them to legal services, to bring HP actions against bad acting landlords. And it's a range of activities with basically counseling, organizing, and then the groups also work and meet monthly to share information and discuss, challenging situations that they're dealing with in different neighborhoods. So it's a way that groups can share information. Sometimes problem landlord owns buildings in multiple boroughs and groups sort of work together to address that. So that's one of the programs. There's also a Housing Preservation Initiative, which Cooper Square doesn't get funded under that. I believe Goals does.
which one?
Housing Preservation Initiative, HPI. So that's another program. I think the deliverables of that.
Well, could we say, I don't mean to interrupt you, but just, could we include one bullet that would talk about just all the preservation programs?
Yeah.
Like, can we say that we want them to support and make sure that funding and support is available for programs and groups doing this kind of work for programs like this?
Mhm.
Can we make that one,
Well,
or do we have to decide what that language is right now too?
Well, we would, but it's not all the programs, so like Stabilizing New York is city council money,
Mhm.
so that wouldn't come from this.
Right.
Mhm.
And we did put that one year when we didn't know,
Right.
the answer was, it's not agency money, it's city council money. I don't know that it will.
Well, that was the next thing I was gonna say,
Right.
because most of the time, the agencies are just administering these
But
funds.
what their answer was, so when you say these programs, the organizations should answer an RFP, that's what their answer was.
Yes.
So, which is not the kind of thing we're looking for, we're looking at more money allocated.
Well, right, so but those are the programs
Right.
that he is talking about,
Right.
included in here, so we could, but we shouldn't, because we're not gonna get the kind of response that we want, which is, but let me just also say, there are programs that are preservation programs that are funded by city council, and then there are those that are funded by the agency.
Which is the ones that we.
Right, so I'm not sure exactly what all of those are right now. So I don't know if we can put a blanket statement that sort of talks about like, resources for this kind of work, but if we can't, we can move on at this point.
Well, we could do two things, we could leave it the way it is, or we can say that we will insert if you're willing to do the research and find out which are agency programs, we can insert that in before the full board.
Well, when you say leave it the way it is, do you mean not include the possible new stuff?
No,
Or do you mean include it and just say that?
include it, just say preservation.
So just say, and possible new funding would be preservation, well, can we elaborate what preservation programs means though at least?
Sure, but it's going to HPD and
Okay.
they're asking
Okay,
us for.
that's
funding.
fine, yeah.
Yeah, but yes, and actually it's a good idea so that when people vote, they know what it is.
That's right, so that would be a clear, and so,
I'm just saying, I don't know if you want to stop and go to George now.
okay, is he
Yeah,
ready?
he's ready.
Yeah.
Okay, so just so that we know what's next before we go to George, so we're reviewing the budget priorities. We just talked about possibly making a new recommendation or supporting the recommendation that is on there. When we come back, we'll take any final questions or any final recommendations, and then we will vote to approve this and send it to, the full
Go to
board.
full board.
And then we will go, and then I think we'll be done after that.
That's it.
And then we'll adjourn, okay? So remember, this is a presentation from George. This is not the city. This is George's unbiased opinion about the zoning text change amendment that is, being proposed. So he is giving us all the sides of it. So please be mindful of that when you ask questions. And I say this for the public as well. George is doing us a service by presenting to us. We worked on this with, right, we worked on it with several community boards. So he is here on our behalf and not on the behalf of the city. So please keep that in mind as you funnel the information that he is giving you. Thank you, George, for being with us this evening. My name is Damaris. I am the interim chair of the Housing, Zoning, and Land Use Committee. I said that in reverse order, but you know what I mean. Welcome tonight, and so we'll begin with allowing you to, how much time, about 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes to present?
I will take as much time as you give me. You can, tell me if to cut it short. There's a lot here, and we can adjust on the fly.
All right, so why don't we say, just so that we make sure we keep people's attention, that we try to shoot for 15, 20 minutes,
Okay,
right?
do that.
And
Let's do that.
we can leave some room for discussion and questions. If you feel that you need additional time, George, please just tell us.
Okay, very good. Again, I'm really happy to be here. This is a big deal. I'm a zoning person, and zoning text amendments, we got 3 of them right now. But this is the home run for me. This is the World Series for me. So I'm glad to be here. So a text amendment, what is that? That's simply just the edit of the zoning resolution text. You add new text and you cross out other text, right? And it's not easy reading. It can come in hundreds of pages of single space text like this. And so there are 3, as I said. Zoning for carbon neutrality, which will be voted on by City Council on November 21st. Zoning for economic opportunity, which is today. Zoning for housing opportunity, which will be starting in 2024. But the scoping for the EIS just started. And this is unusual. The city said it wants input pre-referral, meaning if you have ideas before it even gets to you officially, they want to hear from you. And I think you should take them at their word. So, and again, today is about zoning for economic opportunity, but one update I do want to say, zoning for housing opportunity, the draft scope of work for the environmental review came out a couple weeks ago. The hearing for the draft scope of work will be held on October 26th, written comments by November 6th, and I will give the presentation to Susan, and there's a link to the draft scope of work there. Okay, so zoning for economic opportunity is broken up into these 19 topic areas. This is straight from DCP's deck. I am not going to be reviewing each of those topics. So I'm going to go through a broad overview, and then we're going to get into some of the more meaty, controversial topics, especially those that impact Community District 3. I'm not going to repeat DCP. Their slides are here, which you'll have access to. There's a link to the presentation. And then, you know, the big news for this is that DCP just released the annotated zoning text. I got it yesterday. It's 664 pages long. It's it is a slog. It is an unbelievable. What they're trying here is really actually kind of unbelievable, and I'm grateful that we're getting it before certification or before referral, which will be at the end of the month. So zoning resolution, you know, this is all about uses, and the zoning resolution currently has 50 pages of uses. You know, this is just some of the B's right here. And the idea is that each of these uses is classified into 18 different use groups. And then those use groups can go into different zoning districts. So this is the matrix of current use groups by where that use is allowed by the different zoning districts that we have. And the one thing that everyone can agree on is that the uses and use groups in zoning, they're just a mess. They're just hopelessly out of date. No significant updates for at least 30 years. Most of them date back to the 1961 resolution. And they reflect the manufacturing economy of 1961, and it's a terrible fit with modern uses. We could, you know, it has like umbrella repair shops and telegraph offices and things that are just like kind of ridiculous. And no one's really even tried to update it because it's such a mess. And so like they're finally doing it. This is something that I thought would never happen, but essentially they're really actually getting into updating this. And they're going to be using the North American Industry Classification System, which is in federal standard. So they're taking an outside standard and applying it to uses in New York City. This is a good idea. This is a very good idea because, you know, you need to have a common language when you're trying to regulate these things, and this really does try to bring it up into the 21st century. But there are major changes, right? They're taking the 18 use groups and collapsing them into 10. So there used to be 2 residence categories, there will be 1. There used to be 2 community facility categories, there will be 1. Retail and services, there used to be many for that. It's really a big change in terms of how they're classifying uses. But while the use groups have collapsed, the details on the specific uses are kept. So, you know, this is from the draft text, right? Where they have use group 6 is retail trade establishments, and so you have automotive dealers, and then you have the NAICS code right here, and then you have other types of motor vehicle part dealers underneath it, right? And then you have where these uses are allowed as of right, if they require performance standards and other things that go into them. So, but we still have the 8 different commercial districts. The names have changed, but the differences between them have lessened, right? So they're still here, but really there are 4 categories now. There's the local commercial, waterfront commercial, general commercial, which is mostly the business districts, and then general service. And that's really the 4 big categories now. And so, you know, what does the collapsing mean in practice? So I took a, this is Avenue B, this is Avenue A, Tompkins Square Park. Avenue A is mostly a C2 area. Avenue B is mostly C1, right? C1 is the lightest commercial use, small stores, restaurants, bars, and offices. C2 is still neighborhood commercial. You can have all of those things, but you could also have services like bike rental and repair, movie theaters, pool halls, art studios, lumber stores, you know, things like that. It's a little heavier of a commercial uses can go here. And this distinction between C1 and C2 goes away. Anything you could do in a C2, you could do in a C1. Anything you do in a C1, you could do in a C2. And in most areas, for most people, it's, you know, local commercial, and it's really almost indistinguishable to the layperson. This is another zoning map of this area of your community district. And there are no C3, there are no C5, there are no C7 districts in the community district. There's one tiny little C8 here. What you will see is, there's a C4 and C6s. You have some of those, and the distinction between the uses in C4 and C6s will essentially disappear. They will all, anything you could do in a C6, you could do in a C4, and a C4 you can do in a C6. And mostly they overlap anyway. There's like some precision manufacturing, like jewelry and some home repair services, plumbing shops and electrical stores that now you can do in a C4 that you weren't able to before. And then the C61G, which has a special unique district in this community district, that stays the same. There's no changes there. Okay, so now I'm going to go through topics, like these kind of high-level topics that I think are important to this community district. So topic number one for this community district, I think, is grandfathering. So currently, the way grandfathering works is that if you have a non-conforming use, like a store in a residential district, you're permitted to continue, but if that use stops for a period of 2 years, the right to grandfather lapses. Now, many grandfathered uses went vacant during COVID, and this proposal removes the time limit on the reoccupation of grandfathered uses.
Oh, no.
And really, there's the question here: should non-conforming spaces vacated for more than 2 years be permitted to be reoccupied by a non-conforming use? And this is actually, I think, pretty radical. I don't know of any jurisdiction that does this, right? Grandfathering is common. Expiring right to grandfather is common. Unlimited grandfathering is not common. I've never actually heard of it before, but that's the proposal. All right, home occupations. So home occupations currently, we allow many home occupations, and this change lifts some of the restrictions that we have. So in your home, you could be employed there. People in your household can be employed there, and now you can have up to, well, the proposal is to allow up to 3 employees from outside, from 1 currently. The max size is increased to 49% of the unit from 25% currently. And then the absolute size restriction, currently it's like you can take no more than 500 square foot of your unit to be used for a home occupation. They're proposing to remove that. And then there's also this list of home occupations that were prohibited, that were removed. Barbershops and beauty salons are one that's kind of, I think, an obvious one, because I think that's something that people will do, but it was a prohibited home occupation. And really the question for the community board, I think, and you should think about this because you're going to be getting this in referral soon, is should the regulations on home occupations be relaxed like this? Is this a good idea? Okay, another topic, CPC authorization for retail in residential districts. Okay, so currently the way it works is that a new commercial use cannot be placed in a residential district without grandfathering or a variance or a zone change. And this amendment adds a CPC authorization for stores and offices in residential districts that are small, no more than 2,500 square feet, and it has to be near a corner, or 15,000 square feet for large-scale residential developments that are permitted under a large-scale permit. And so what is an authorization? Authorization is a discretionary CPC action that is not subject to ULURP, and there is no hearing. So this is something that you could an applicant could make an application to the CPC and they could just allow it. And I think this is an important thing for community boards, because community boards, have this right to weigh in on land use issues, right? And authorizations don't allow that, or they don't, it's not part of the process. So they may forward you the application. They have that option. And so are expanding authorizations a concern? And that's something for you to consider. Okay, outdoor commercial uses. Currently, zoning prohibits most outdoor commercial activities. And most outdoor commercial activities have to occur inside. This restriction prevents most commercial and community facility uses for using yards, courts, and open space. And we're not talking about sidewalks, because sidewalks are outside the zoning lot. We're not talking about that. This is actually on their lot. That restriction preventing most outdoor uses stays generally, but if you look at the tables, they've added this category U, right, which means that it can happen outdoors. So there's some of these are obvious, like boat repair, right? Recreational boat repair, you can do outdoors. Okay. But then you have health and fitness establishments, which you can also do outdoors. Like these people are doing yoga in Industry City outdoors. So that is something that I think is a little less obvious, that you could actually have a lot of activities. It's not just health and fitness. It's a lot of activities can now occur outdoors. And is that a good idea? Micro distribution facilities. Okay, so currently the way it works, warehouses and distribution centers are use group 16, which means that they can only be in C8 and M districts. And so basically there's almost no place these can locate in Community District 3. Increased demand for deliveries, especially during the pandemic, created this demand for dark stores, right? Where there would essentially be these micro fulfillment centers. And in 2022, the Department of Buildings issued a building bulletin which said, yeah, you can do this, but you know, you have to be open to the public, and at least some part of the facility must allow customers in during certain amount of hours, and they could buy something there too. Okay, what this does though is it takes that building bulletin, which was an interpretation, and tries to codify it into law, right? So this allows for these dark stores, as many people call them, in C1 and C2 districts in neighborhood residential, as long as they're small, less than 2,500 square feet, or in the more intense commercial districts up to 5,000 square feet. And then on the second floor, it could be as much as 10,000 square feet. And then there are special permits if you want to go bigger. And I think, you know, there's a very fundamental question here is, do these things belong in your neighborhood commercial districts? And that's, you know, I think something for community boards to think about. Nightclubs. So nightclubs in zoning terms, in old zoning terms or current zoning terms, eating or drinking establishments with entertainment and capacity of more than 200 persons, or establishments of any capacity with dancing. And they've always been hard to cite in New York City, especially if there's dancing involved. So what they've done is they've taken the dancing restriction out of zoning entirely. And that, okay, in C1 and C3 through C3 districts, you can now do things like scheduled entertainment and with cover charges, which you really weren't able to do previously. This is as long as the capacity is less than 200 people. In C4 through C7 districts, there's no size restriction. And again, historically, the larger venues, the ones with over 200 people, have been very difficult to cite because of, in commercial districts anyway, because of the location restriction, because it has to be more than 100 feet from a residential district, which, you know, in some places that's very hard to cite. This restriction about distance from residential districts for the very large ones stays, though you could get a special permit to get it waived. But you know, the real thing here is local nighttime entertainment has become easier, and is that okay? Another topic: amusement. So currently, Coney Island style amusement rides are limited to C7 districts, which is basically Coney Island. This change is going to allow amusement in more places. You could have small scale amusements in neighborhood commercial, large scale in the central business districts, and outdoors still permitted in C7 and in C8. Now, this has gotten my attention just because this ride that you see here, if it is glass enclosed, this becomes a permitted use in, you know, the C4 through C8 districts. And somebody is trying to get a ride like this permitted as an accessory use in a hotel right now. And I'm sure that effort to try to get these types of entertainment uses, especially in the business districts, that this is in response to that, right? There is a demand for this sort of thing, and people are trying to go through hoops to get these things cited. And in other cities, business districts have been turned into entertainment districts, and some might say that's true of Times Square. But honestly, this shift has been really impeded by zoning in New York City, because zoning is pretty hostile to entertainment uses, and should it be? So casinos are not here, even though DCP, it's like number 10 in their list of items it's going to address. It's not in here, and it will be coming later this year. I'm almost done. Research laboratories. I want to spend a little bit more time with this, because I think this is not only about research laboratories, it's about uses in general. So this text amendment changes research laboratories to use group 7, which is going to be permitted basically in all commercial districts except for the C3 districts. So for decades, our current zoning classified research labs as use group 17, which are only allowed in M districts. But in 2016, when the city decided that life sciences was important strategically, and the EDC said we have to get more life sciences in New York City, the fact that research laboratories could only go in manufacturing districts was seen as a problem. So the city adopted this memo, which basically said that they were going to interpret the zoning to read research laboratories as use group 9, which is allowable in C2 and higher commercial districts, as well as M districts. And the change that they're promoting right now is going to just get rid of this and try to codify making research laboratories in basically most commercial districts. And also, by special permit, you could put them in residential districts, where a lot of the institutions are, like Rockefeller University or Memorial Sloan Kettering. So also in 2016, when they came up with this memo, the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene sponsored a change to the health code that required certain research laboratories to register in the city. And the Department of Health wrote, the department is concerned that an accident at a New York City-based high containment research laboratory would have catastrophic consequences. Now, I foiled the listing that they required to get collected for these high containment research laboratories, and the Department of Health rejected my foil because they said to release the names and addresses of these facilities would constitute an untenable security risk. So on one hand, the city is making these uses very easier to cite. You can go into C1 districts if this passes. While on the other hand, the city is saying that these facilities are too dangerous to even disclose, and an accident could have catastrophic consequences. Now, I am not pretending to have any expertise in this area. I'm just a zoning guy. But I find this lack of consistent messaging a little concerning. So, in sum, these changes relax the use regulations nearly everywhere for most things. So, for example, for generations, the city has made regulations that discourage car ownership, right? I think we've all seen those. But this amendment considers existing light motor vehicle repair and maintenance shops to be conforming no matter where they're located, so that they can expand. Many manufacturing uses, food, textiles, clothing, shoes, computers, machinery, soap, pharmaceuticals, they can be located in most C districts, including C1 districts, just as long as they're small, right? So if you're in a C1 or C2, it has to be less than 5,000 square feet. If you're in a C4 or C7, it has to be less than 10,000 square feet. And performance standards will apply, which means that it will diminish the possibility of vibrations and noise coming from these that would affect people. But that's still a very big change, right? These were uses that were only permitted in M districts. Now, I will say that this is consistent with a national trend in zoning towards more form-based codes, which are less concerned about what happens in a building and more concerns about the form of the buildings. But still, it's a very big change with how we've been doing things in New York City. And then finally, for CB3, one of the things that I helped you all with a few years ago was this idea that regulating formula retail to preserve small scale retail and locally based retail in your neighborhoods. And in 2019, this community board adopted a resolution to support the concept of an East Village special commercial district to essentially regulate formula retail. And zoning for economic opportunity is about removing barriers, not adding them, right? It's very unfriendly to this concept of adding barriers to any sorts of uses. And I think it's very unlikely we'll see another special enhanced commercial district which would implement these kinds of ideas in New York City anytime soon. It's all about removing barriers. It's the city of yes, as the mayor likes to say. That's what I have. Let me go through the next steps first. So we have zoning text. Again, I got it yesterday. It's very long. It's very involved. I'm not going to pretend that I mastered it all in less than 24 hours, but I tried. It's going to be referred at the end of October. You're going to have 60 days for your review, even though it's 664 pages long. And the amendment has a lot more than I talked about: loading, film studios, locations of commercial uses, a lot of stuff in the outer boroughs, which we didn't talk about at all. And there's a lot more information that's available online. And again, the city is encouraging comments early and often. So if you have thoughts, even unofficially expressing them now, they will take them. That's what I got.
Great. Thank you. All right, thank you, George, for your very thorough and succinct presentation. I think this committee really appreciates the way that you framed some of the issues that are coming before us. And so I guess I have a starting question, but first I want to make sure that if anybody wants from the public to speak on this matter, that you have filled out a speaker card. You will be called first, and then we will go to committee. I'm gonna abuse my chair privilege by asking the first question, which is, we know that they've given you a lot of they've given us a lot of text to read. Does that text also include or cite any research or studies that support this national trend of becoming the cities of yes? I mean, is there any data anywhere that shows that this is either good for the economy, for housing, or for anything other than, commercial interests?
Well, I can tell you that they did release the text with annotations explaining the changes that were made and why they're being made. However, there's not a lot of sites. There's not a lot of information saying, like they'll say, we are removing this because it is anachronistic or it is out of fashion or something like that. They're not like putting sites behind any of it, which is, I think, what you're looking for is like you're looking for research, and there's really not much of that here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we'd love to see some justification for some of these changes. I mean, it's already a very difficult, complex subject matter to get through for most people.
It is.
And the public who doesn't have to deal with this on a regular basis. So it's difficult to, weigh in either way, and they're limiting. So with that being said, I have loads of questions, but we still have some time, and I want to make sure that folks can ask any questions. So I don't see any speaker cards. I don't have anything from the public, but I'll still ask you if you want to speak. If not, we're going to go on to Zoom for folks who are from the public. Please raise your hand so that we can call on you. And how many do we have right now? Right now, I have one speaker who has raised their hand, and we're gonna go straight to that speaker, and then it's Catherine Freed. Right? So Catherine Freed is with us. She's our next speaker. Please, Catherine, if you're with us, you can go ahead.
Sure.
Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted.
Oh, okay, great, thanks. Thanks, George, that was a great presentation. One thing I've been wondering about, I know this is a text change, but since a lot of the use groups also deal with height restrictions, what happens with the height restrictions?
Oh, they all stay the same. So this doesn't change the bulk regulations at all. As far as I'm aware, it's really all about use.
Okay, and then when they were talking about some of the home uses, there is a question about what happens with ones, like for instance, they said beauty parlors, where beauty parlors, I think, have to have certain ventilation because they do use certain chemicals that might cause fumes. What happens there? Who determines the ventilation, and how does the community have input?
Yeah, so home occupations would be as of right. There isn't a lot of community input on stuff like that. If there's a nuisance or something like that that's created from it, you can complain after the fact. There are, if you look at the home occupations, it can't have certain objectionable effects, right? So instead of listing uses that were prohibited, it instead goes and it says, like, it can't, create noise. It can't create nuisances on the neighbors, and so it's likely that if there are smells or chemicals or something like that, that there would be an argument to keep that would not be something that could be permitted under zoning, but that's always a difficult thing to judge for some of these home occupations, right? Because you don't necessarily know how big it's going to be. So people are just going to do it, right? You don't necessarily have to get a Department of Buildings approval for something like this. And then, so after the fact, you've got to go in and make complaints if you have objectionable effects.
Yeah, so it being after the fact doesn't make me very happy about that, because we already know how difficult it is to deal with the buildings department and things that are problems that you need changes or that are nuisances. Yeah. And then,
It is. I mean, and I will volunteer this part is that, in a lot of other jurisdictions, home occupations are permitted, but it's essentially there's this distinction of whether people have to travel to you or not, right? Are you regularly receiving
what about people with foot
customers?
traffic?
Oh, and there's no restriction on foot traffic.
That's insane. Because if I'm right, you can put it anywhere in, say, a residential building.
Yeah, it's got to be accessory to the residential use, right? So somebody's got to live there, right? And primarily it has to be 51% residents and up to 49% non-residents. But you could have 3 people working for you along with your family. It is a pretty big change, I think.
And what about people coming in and out all day long?
This is going to be your last question, and then I have to call on someone else, and then if there's still time, we can come back to you, okay? But ask this last question, please.
All right, so I guess I was going to ask about dry cleaning, but instead I'll ask, what about the loading zones? As I understand it, I think there's a whole thing going on with loading zones, which has been a problem in this board because of a lot of the new buildings where they didn't have loading zones or they didn't plan it right. And with all the traffic congestion, with no loading zones or no additional loading zones, it causes even more congestion.
Yeah, and they're going to make it easier and lessen the requirements for loading. And the way it works now is that the different uses have different loading requirements based upon the use, as not necessarily related to actually what they need. It's always based upon the use, and those uses, they set those requirements, most of them based in 1961 calculations of what these uses needed back then. And so the idea is that sometimes it ends up making tenanting buildings difficult because a use wants to go in and then suddenly they need another loading dock. There's no other place to put the loading dock, so they can't go in. And so they're looking to lessen the loading requirements, especially on existing buildings, so that it makes it easier to re-tenant buildings with different uses. That does nothing for the congestion that you're talking about. It really just does make it easier to tenant these buildings with different uses.
All right, if you get a chance, Damaris, come back to me if you would.
Yeah, I definitely will. Thank you, Catherine. We appreciate all these really thoughtful questions. This is really complex subject matter, and this use change is going to be significant. So we really need to pay attention. Do I have anybody else from the committee that wants to ask a question? Because I have two people from the public who wish to speak who are present. Susan, did you want to say something? Please.
Yeah, we'll use the mic over here. So this non-conforming use is dying. We're CB3 is, I think, first or second in the city in the number of non-conforming uses, which have generally become for on a side street where people are sleeping instead of on the avenues. And we have many vacant storefronts on the avenues, but yet and we have a need for housing. It should be reverting to housing, but the city, this is what they're doing is the opposite of what we need, particularly down here. So Department of Buildings right now is really dragging its feet on enforcing the current non-conforming. I did not know why until now. I actually just wrote an email to the commissioner's special advisor today because of problems we're having down here. Now I understand them. One thing, I don't know if you'll know this, so if this would take effect immediately when the ULURP is adopted, or when?
Well, yeah, there are a couple things that there are, like if you have an active application at the Department of Buildings or something like that, you're allowed to finish it under the old rules. But yeah, I mean, basically that's true. After the city council votes, all of these effects would go in, and almost everything would go into effect immediately.
I just don't know what to say about it. So the other thing I want to ask, when you talk about light businesses within residential areas, would that be able to include any time limit? And there's a very big difference between a light business that closes at 6 or 7 or one that closes at 4 a.m. Would time be considered at all?
It's not in zoning. That's not a zoning thing.
So we can't, there's nothing we could do. We couldn't even ask to have it.
Okay. So in other jurisdictions, yes, they do stuff like that. It's just not something we do in New York City. So because we don't do it in New York City, it ends up being a very, very very tough ask, if you will. I think, Susan, on your point on the grandfathered uses, this is where community boards can make a difference, right? Where you're bringing your local perspective here. You're saying, we need housing in this area, and we have vacant storefronts that no one's using. This is working cross purposes because the city wants more housing too, right? And so you can help connect the dots here and maybe make a difference on something like this. And so, I encourage you, especially if you all feel strongly about it, to make that a focus of your comments.
So is it useful, we didn't plan on doing any resolutions, but is it useful on a couple of points like that to vote on a resolution now?
Well, okay. So when I spoke with staff about early comments before certification or before it was referred out, they were like saying, it doesn't need to be a resolution. It could just be information we're hearing from people. That's fine. It could be a resolution if you want, but actually it makes it easier for them, at the staff level, for it not to be, this is complicated, right? 664 pages of zoning text is an enormous amount of work. Whether you agree with it or not, what they've done here is an unbelievable task, right? It's just a lot of work, and it is not perfect. right? I can tell you that for sure. There are errors, there are things in here, and they want to hear those things. And so you could do it as a resolution, Susan. You could do it as just comments from the chair or a person or a member. Either way.
All right, just so procedurally, I have a quick question and I want to give an opportunity to the two speakers and then we can come back to committee unless anybody's dying to ask a question and we can yield it to the members of the public. But you know what? Just for clarity purposes, I have November 6th. Is that when the comment period ends and the comments are due, or is that when the comment period begins?
Okay. Well, so that is for the environmental assessment for the scope of work for the environmental review for zoning for housing opportunity. I'm sorry, that's the third bit of the City of Yes text amendments, which is coming last, right? So they're going to do an EIS for that first, and then that's not going. You're not going to see that until next year, right? What the schedule for this is, you're going to economic opportunity is you're going to get the copy from DCP at the end of this month. And then you will have 60 days from the end of this month, whenever you get it, to submit your comments. So that puts it towards the end of December.
I have confirmed with DCP, we can vote in December.
All right, so that was what I was gonna ask. So the public, and then that would probably be the best time. We've had enough time to review or some time to review, ask clarifying questions and come up with a resolution. We can, right, that's the, say it again?
That will be the ULURP vote in December.
In December,
Yes.
That's at, what stage will that be at? That will be at the city council stage or?
No,
at
this
DCP?
is coming from us.
Oh, so our process
And
begins in December.
then it goes to the borough president and city council.
So our vote is due. We
Right,
already
we're
hear.
gonna vote on the ULURP in December.
So they'll make a
But-
presentation at full board.
No, we're gonna have, DCP is gonna present in November, and then we'll vote in December.
Okay.
But what we can do is just send some comments in, like, if we can just send in without a vote, without a resolution, that the non-conforming use change is not good for this community because we have a need for housing, but we have a lot of vacant stores in commercial districts.
Right.
So
So you're suggesting that we make comments and pass a resolution to submit those
we
comments?
don't have to, you just said we don't need a resolution, we can just submit comments.
So is there an official request from this committee to submit comments, or are you saying that each of us individually can now submit comments?
Well, anybody can always do that individually.
Okay.
I'm gonna suggest on that point, because it's gonna be so big for us, that the committee decide to just send an email with, we discuss, just a few sentences, that this works at the, it's conflicts with our community needs. We always need more housing, we have vacant stores.
Not that I'm against that, right?
No.
Everybody knows that, but how does this conflict with our responsibility to give the full board the same opportunity to weigh in with those comments? So this committee sends those comments without the full board support and sending those comments, which is a different thing, because we're executing that as a committee, which is
Right.
different than me, Damaris Reyes, sending comments on my own, right? So how do we navigate that? Like, is that permitted? Can we do that?
Well, I guess it's up to the board, and what I would suggest is if the committee wants to do it, then bring it to the exec. If the committee decides they want to do it, I would then bring it to this exec and say, this is what the committee would like to do. How does the exec want to deal with this?
So just procedurally, right? It is now November 12th, right? Today's the 12th? October 12th.
You're right.
I am October 11th, right? October 11th is today, right? And so this is gonna be presented at the board in November. And then we're gonna vote on it in December. And the suggestion is that we submit comments that we can, but to do
In
so.
order to impact what
To
they-
impact what is happening before a vote, because obviously we want to submit comments, right? And those comments, if we decide as a committee to do so, we go to exec, we say we want to do this, which means we have to present an exec now in October, so that in November, we have enough time to draft our comments, or thereafter, if we already have our comments.
No, I don't think that's what we're saying. I think we're saying we could just make comments on a few.
Okay.
So tell me if I'm wrong. I think we could just say, we want to make, before we do all the ULURP stuff, we would just like to make comments on a few points that really impact our community and send them in now to DCP, because they're looking at these comments before, I don't know if they're before they're even refer, are they taking this into consideration before they refer?
That's what they told me.
So this would be taking it into consideration before they refer the amendment. I don't know if we even have time to do that, because our exec is next Thursday, I guess we would. It hasn't happened, this is new, the city is doing stuff to us that they've never done
All
before.
right, so what do we want to do? I mean, we still have to hear from the public, and we still have our own questions. So maybe we should go through that and then carve out a couple minutes at the end to make a decision. If we find that there are pressing matters right now that we feel are urgent that we need to put forward, or if we think that we have enough time from now until then to come up with something, because then we'll also have to do the majority of that work on submitting those comments online in some way to each other, because we're not gonna be able to work together to determine what comments we want to submit unless we decide on all those comments tonight. Is everybody with me?
Which we would have to do.
Right, so then our only option is decide on our comments tonight, or in November at our next meeting, we still have time.
No, he's saying they're referring it out before October, and they're saying that they would take this into consideration before they refer it out. Is that correct, George?
Yeah, that's what they told me, yes.
What is the deadline?
I mean, I don't understand what the difference is, whether they take it into consideration before or after, because they're reviewing all the comments afterwards.
Do you want to
Like
answer
60
that?
days we're getting 60 days to submit our comments. And that starts later, it doesn't start now, so, I mean, they're not gonna submit or change any new text and resubmit it to the public.
George, can you answer that? Because I have no answer.
Yeah, they told me that, I think, a couple of months ago when they were going through the, preliminary stuff. They didn't have the draft text again, which I just got yesterday. So it is kind of late in the game to be submitting comments, but nevertheless, I think Susan's point, like if you feel strongly about one or two things, the more often they hear it, the better. Like the more they hear it from people, and the more different people that say it, it's good in terms of getting it into the record and making it part of the whole narrative about this. So you're absolutely right in terms of like the logistics of it. It's late in the game to do it, but they haven't cut it off.
Still get to submit comments, the public still gets to submit comments, right? So it's not late, actually. It's really not late.
It's late to impact the text amendment.
Well, then I don't know what the point of the comments is, if we don't get a chance.
So what is 2 weeks is could be the sweet spot, and 4 weeks is not good? I mean, I don't understand the difference.
What I'm
Yeah,
saying,
What
they're not gonna change the text at this point.
At this point.
They're not
So
going
then we're
to.
saying it's not,
So,
there's no reason.
so
to
the
do it.
only comments they really want at this point are substantive comments on what they are proposing. Not the way that they're proposing it and the language, but what they're proposing. And for that, we don't have to have that done tonight, because we're not gonna get that done
People
tonight.
can make individual comments if they want.
That's right. If this committee, though, would like to, which what you were recommending, submit comments as a committee, and then ask the board to support that, then we can make that decision tonight, and then we have to come up, then we will go to exec next week and tell them that that is our intention. And then we have to figure out what is the process that does not violate the
Well, the
sunshine
bylaws-
laws for us to be able to, work on this.
The bylaws allow the exec in certain, in time emergency, time.
So we could figure that out
To-
afterwards though, right?
To, the exec can vote and then it would be ratified by the full board, because
I'm just saying how we collect the comments as a committee. That's all I'm saying. All right, so we're gonna move on, right? And we're gonna, Skylar Cummings is our first speaker.
Here, I'm gonna pass it
I can
down.
also.
There, use the microphone, because we're not right
Oh,
over the
okay,
mics.
Is it on?
It's it's,
Okay.
you guys can hear it, you can hear it, right, George?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm Skylar Cummings. I am the campaign manager for land use at Goals. My question was a follow-up to talking about the grandfathering issue. And you had mentioned that completely removing this limit is not common at all. Do you know of places like cities that have removed it completely? Yeah, why you think it's uncommon?
I don't know of any jurisdiction that has. I don't have encyclopedic knowledge on this, and I haven't researched it. But generally speaking, you have in Euclidean zoning, which is essentially where you separate uses from each other. You have this concept of grandfathering, which allows you to carry forward the use from the previous regulations. You don't have to abandon your use, but there's always an expiration at some point, right? I've never heard of permanent grandfathering. I don't even. It's really an alien concept, right? It's like just because you're there, you get to continue it forever, even if you've closed it down for 10 years. I like 20 years, like how long? It's really, I think, opening up a can of worms that I think is, from a regulation standpoint, going to be difficult to manage.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have another speaker, which is Dylan.
Yep.
So thank you, Skylar, for your question.
Hey, George. I was wondering if there was a maximum density of these dark stores, or what was the technical term?
Skylar, can you identify yourself?
Micro distribution center. And maximum density, you mean on a particular street, or size of them?
How many are allowed in a certain area? Because I feel like these micro distribution centers aren't really the most pedestrian friendly. They kind of serve a non-use to the neighborhood. People can't really walk in, even if they have a cooler in the back, they can buy a Coke, which is going to do. I used to work by one of those places, and most of the workers, when they were free, they were most of the time free because people weren't ordering groceries, throughout the day. They would just kind of stand in the corner, smoking cigarettes, just kind of, I don't know, being dudes. Yeah, I was just wondering, how many of these are going to be allowed? Because I know that we have the bike infrastructure to support these types of businesses, but I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
There is no maximum density in a particular neighborhood, but they are limited by size, right? In C1 and C2 districts, no, it can't be larger than 2,500 square feet as of right, which is relatively small, and in the C4, C5, C6, it could be up to 5,000 on the ground floor and 10,000 on the second floor. That's bigger, but there is nothing related to the density in a particular neighborhood or a street.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, so does Alistair?
Sorry, one more last question. Hi, George. So on the grandfathering, if a building is overbuilt on a lot.
Yes.
Let's say it was built 100 years ago, it's grandfathered. That grandfathering lives pretty much for forever, for as long as that building is built, right?
The life of the building, right?
Life of the building, but that's essentially forever concerning the life of the building, right? If you demolish a building, then that's gone. But
yes,
you do have extremely long grandfathering depending on how long the building stands.
There's conforming and then compliance, right? So there are conforming uses and then complying buildings. And the thing is that a building stays there, right? You know, it's overbuilt and it doesn't go away. And if it does go away, it cannot be built to that size, right? If it burns down, that's one of the reasons that people have trouble insuring those types of buildings, because if it burns down, it can't be replaced because it's grandfathered. But you're all right. I mean, buildings that are overbuilt be there for over 100 years, and the use that's continually used can be there for 100 years. It just can't, if it's vacant for 2 years, and that's an arbitrary number, it loses the right.
How frequently does that happen? How many?
Constantly. We're one of the, like I said, we have, it's CB2 and CB3. We actually have a map of it that we got a few years ago.
Can you share that with us?
Pardon?
Will you share it at a later date with us?
Yeah, I'll try to find it. Yes, it happened today. Yes, it happens. I have residents because we've educated residents, and it was part of our 2008 rezoning to actually extend the areas for the 2 years. So yeah, it does happen. And it used to be that DOB would immediately say the burden of proof is on the landlord to prove it hasn't been. But now they don't want to deal with it. Hells Angels Clubhouse is an example. It was residential for 50 years and they just put it back to retail.
Yeah, so, okay. So do we have any other committee members with questions?
Yes.
Yes, John, thank you. And then, did you have your hand up also? No, okay.
So one of the things I'm concerned about with is obviously there's a huge tension between housing and business. Do we have any say in essence, if some things are converted from housing to a business, do we have any say in those decisions whatsoever? And particularly I'm concerned about second floor use and maybe even third floor use, because that actually creates an issue, particularly if it's a nightlife business, a huge issue. And there's actually an incentive for a landlord to convert housing to a business, because at the end of the day, they can potentially make more money, has greater resale value, but yet we lose housing. So how do we deal with that tension that's going to wind up possibly really hurting our community?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question. And I don't think there's a good answer to it. One of the things I really didn't get at is the change in commercial uses within the building. Because now, as you were mentioning, you can now go to the second floor in a lot of these neighborhood commercial districts where you weren't able to before. And then they also now have, the way it works now is commercial must be underneath residential, and they're trying to change it so that it can be side by side, just as long as they have different entrances and they don't share the same corridor. And so there's incentives to expand commercial uses in these mixed buildings. And what happens to the residences in there? Can they compete with those commercial uses? And I think that's a very fair question, and I don't think it's well answered here.
Yeah, I don't think they can. I mean, in all seriousness, and a landlord is more likely to allow a business to stay vacant for business reasons than housing. So I would love to see something where we actually have input on these decisions. Second, I would love to have maybe greater input if it's going to be second floor, particularly in this neighborhood, for it to be a nightlife establishment. That to me seems like an incredibly bad idea. I mean, our buildings aren't built for that. A ground floor space, you actually have some extra roofage where you can actually put up, dampeners or whatever, but that's not the same on the second floor. So you got a DJ on the second floor. I mean, it's like, are you serious?
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, it seems like there needs to be some approval process for the committee for the community to actually have a say on some of these decisions where they're clearly just wrong. And they don't suit the community.
So, let me, if I can, thank you, those are really, really good points. Also, there are many, businesses and restaurants that are happy to have the first floor above them vacant or used as an apartment because it serves as a sound buffer for the rest of the tenants, and so that's another incentive to continue to take units of housing off of the market. Just as another, so, I guess procedurally, George, for these kinds of comments, right? These are the kinds of comments that we could be submitting to them when we are submitting these comments, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and your comments go to the City Planning Commission on this, but also be in touch with your council members because ultimately they have to vote on this too. And they can make changes after it even comes from the CPC to them. Especially if you feel very strongly about these things, all of your electeds, the borough president, everybody, so yes, submit your comments to CPC, but don't forget about your other electeds because they have a say in this too.
All right, any other questions from the committee? Steve, please.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that the scenario you're discussing is possible because that kind of use wouldn't be possible to have a nightlife establishment on an upper floor, like you're talking about home-based businesses?
We have a few.
That's, yeah.
Well,
No, but they're gonna start allowing second floors to be converted.
They're gonna allow
They're gonna allow conversion of like a second floor.
On Avenue B, we have a second floor nightlife,
okay.
and we get a lot of complaints.
Is it a residential?
The building is residential.
So they're just using the apartment as a nightclub?
I don't think so. I think I don't know if it's an apartment or what type. Just one, I know, but I know because I get complaints.
So their liquor license can extend up to.
Yes, their liquor license.
All right. I have a question about ground floor uses. Like currently, I know when I saw the presentation that was done by DCP on this, the webinar, and they talk about how right now you can't have light manufacturing on ground floors so that they want to allow more makers to be able to ground floor spaces, which to me seems like it would actually be a good thing in this neighborhood. We have a large creative community. It would be nice if we had less cannabis shops opening up in the neighborhood perhaps, and more, people who are doing designing and manufacturing, making sculptural things, selling things. What is your take on allowing that kind of use?
The changes do that. That's exactly what there's all kinds of manufacturing uses that can go into as low as C1 districts. Just as long as it's not bigger than 5,000 square feet in a C1 or C2 district, or bigger than 10,000 square feet in a C4, C5, C6 district. So yeah, they've really bought into that, and that's a big change.
So
wait, are you done?
Yeah,
it's related to Steve's question. What if they start leaning into this though? You know what I mean? So like it started out as like, oh, we just have 1,000. Oh, now we got another one. We're up to like 3,000. Then it goes to 4. Can they leg into it, or is there a limit?
Leg into it. I'm sorry.
So kind of like not do it piecemeal, obviously, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you can expand as needed up to a certain size, and that's 5,000 square feet.
But what if they created a different LLC? They could get away with what they want, right?
Yeah, it's by by zoning law, right? And so if they ended up being, even if they're different LLCs, but if they're the same zoning lot, then that would still be limited to 5,000 square feet. But if they were, the same establishment across two different zoning lots, well, then they could go up to more.
All right. So if we don't have, I have a final question, and then I'd like to wrap us up so that we know what our charge is. So what about, we know that they're changing use groups, so that's the proposal, right?
Yeah.
And so, they want to allow for some of this manufacturing. And I understand the considerations of size, but what about safety considerations, like hazardous materials? Like, are there any definitions about like what kind of, I couldn't see it, so maybe I'll have to read it through. But clearly, they must have some recommendations about what those manufacturing uses can be, and some restrictions about health and safety, right? Because even like OSHA requirements have to apply.
Right. So in zoning, we have these things called performance standards for manufacturing districts or manufacturing uses. And, you know, a lot of these either industrial or semi-industrial uses have to meet the performance standards, which deal with noise, vibration, smells, dust, things like that get generated by maker spaces. And if they don't perform, well, then they're not permitted, or they're permitted only in M districts or M2 or M3, right? The heavier manufacturing uses have to go into those places. And so the performance standards are pretty stringent in the uses that are allowed in the C1 and commercial districts, right? The idea is that they don't want them bothering the neighbors. But I mean, I will say that, you know, these things only get enforced when somebody is breaking the rules, right? Somebody gets called, and that's just the way, the nature of these.
And that's with everything, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's with everything.
I mean, there's a consideration there. I owned a yogurt business and we were regulated by the state. I could not actually open, so there are a lot of places I could open light manufacturing, but the problem was I was limited by the actual space because it had to be set up for a food establishment. So some of that type of, so I even though there's a change, I think what he's talking about here is that it's not as bad as you think it is, because they're gonna get regulated and just won't be able to open. They won't get signed off on by DOB or by state organizations. So I'm less concerned about that. I'm more concerned about losing housing. I think light manufacturing is probably good as long as it's like, you know, clothing or something or whatever. But, you know, when I think anything involving chemicals is gonna have a hard time finding a drain they can actually put that in, and it's not gonna get signed off on. So I'm less worried about that, personally.
Okay. So any other comments? All right, so Catherine, you said you had some final comments that you wanted to make. The floor is yours.
Right, I'm still, okay, not me.
If we can though, because it's already 9:45 and we still have to wrap up the process, I'm gonna ask you, Catherine, respectfully, if you could keep it, your questions to like 2 to 3 minutes tops, okay?
Sure. That's fine. I'll just make it really quick because a lot of the things I was concerned about. I'm wondering about things like, we talked about where they're allowing bars and dancing. I'm wondering what kind of limitations they have. For instance, right now, I think bars can only be so close to a school, or strip joints can only be so close. Are any of do these restrictions still apply?
I believe they all still apply. The one that was really restrictive is 100 feet from a residential district for larger nightclubs, and that's still there. And I think the others with the adult establishments are also still there.
And what about special districts like I should say, or like landmarks, things like that? All of that still applies. A use still has to go through that?
So yes, landmarks laws aren't changed by this.
Okay. I think that's it. The only other thing I'd worry about is weight restrictions and some of the manufacturing, even light manufacturing uses, if the buildings are actually able to, if the usage is too heavy for it.
Right. Ultimately, that'll be a building code thing, not governed by zoning, right? And
Right.
as somebody was saying, is that there are a lot of different codes that overlap. Zoning only does one thing, and then there are building codes and other regulations that deal with other things. And just these things have to fit with everything to actually be able to be cited.
Okay, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we have one more question from Vincent, and then we're gonna wrap up because we have to be out of here in the next 10 minutes. So Vincent, please try to keep your comment brief or your question brief if you can. Thank you.
Yes.
my question is that how long? I don't want to complicate this for the resolution. To earn my support and consideration. Would we be accepting to, would this be found out between 1 to 3? Okay. I do support that zoning of the business, but to get my full consideration about a lot of heavily caseload work in the resolution, we would be accepting to be considered how to be found, complicating process to be found out between 1 and 3 left over to get our votes and my votes too.
I'm not sure that we completely understood what that meant, what he was trying to say. But Vincent is a member, so we take his comments and we use comments to weigh in on what we vote on, but he doesn't actually get a vote. He gets the opportunity to speak, to influence our decision, which he has not been able to do that. So I just want you to convey that to him, if you can, please.
You can also submit his comments prior.
Yeah, and he can submit his comments to us also in writing, if that makes it easier. Oh, not to us, to DCP. Okay. So is he satisfied with that resolution? We move forward now? Okay.
Yes, so email you.
He can email the Department of City Planning, and the address and the text will be eventually on the city, on the community board's website. And he can find out on the community board's website exactly how and where to send his comments, okay? And how to follow this issue. Okay, thank you. So we're gonna move forward then. And so, right, we, just to reiterate, just to sort of recap and really quickly. So if we have any, we should take time to look at the 600-page document.
Sorry, he's asking who is responsible for the casinos, the nightclubs, and the restaurants and things like that.
That would be, so Amanda, I think we've got to tell, those would be private ventures, and who's responsible for the zoning is the city. So, but it's not an individual, this is a proposal from the city to change the uses of different space. Okay, so we're gonna move on though, I'm gonna shut us down now. Thank you.
Okay, if I could just say, the text that George is referring to, if you go on our website and look at our calendar of meetings, it's attached to the agenda item. And as Damaris suggested, we'll put a section on the homepage also for DCP information on the text amendment.
Thank you. All right, so for us procedurally, then, I mean, at this point.
We let George go?
We let George go. Thank you, George, so much.
Thank you. Good job.
And for a thorough and very candid presentation. And I hope, we may send you a couple of questions if that's okay.
Absolutely, that's fine, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thanks for the interest. Okay, bye now.
So for us then, our next step is to take some time, try to read this. If anyone feels strongly that we need to submit comments as a committee, then I guess let Susan and myself know so that we can begin to gather and then go to exec next week and let exec know that we would like them to submit comments on behalf of the board and so that they can take a vote and do that. But we don't have to wait. Sorry, let me recap. It doesn't all have to happen next week, actually. I'm sorry. I forgot that we went ahead and we changed things up. So we don't actually have to do this by next week.
We can't.
We can, but we don't. And I'm gonna recommend that we don't do it by next week.
Okay.
And the reason I'm gonna recommend that we don't do it by next week is because I think that it does not give us adequate time to thoroughly look through this. And I don't think that anything that we submit next week is going to move the needle in any significant way anyway. So we might as well take a little extra time, if we can, be a little bit more thorough and submit the comments during the actual comment period when it'll be, it'll be weighed against what other people are saying. Then we get a presentation again in November at the full board. Is that correct?
No, here.
Oh, again, another presentation there?
Well, we
Oh,
have.
now it's the city. Now it's the city.
But I would like to suggest from this, if you want to prepare questions for DCP to answer when they present next month, you could do that and send it to me and I'll.
Okay, so we
send
can
it
do
to
that
them.
as well, right? So then immediately go through the text if you can, prepare questions, submit them to Susan so that we can send them to DCP in advance so they can come prepared to answer some of those in November at this committee. Then after that, it goes to full board. If we still feel that the community board wants to officially submit comments, then we should take that to exec. Can we do that? It doesn't
No,
have to be a
not even
resolution. Moving forward, right, we were gonna submit comments now.
But you said you prefer not.
But the only reason that George was telling us, Susan, to submit comments was what he was saying was that the city drafted the document and if we had any comments about how they drafted it, not the content itself,
No,
because
no,
the content is now.
No, he was talking about submitting content.
But they're not gonna change content then.
So it's late.
Right.
Maybe if we did this last month. it would
Right,
be
but what
better.
I'm suggesting is let me finish. What I'm suggesting is a process. If this committee officially would like to submit comments, we can do that if we talk to exec. Is that not what you said before? That if exec.
If you wanna do it now, but you're pretty much saying, and, it's so late in the game, it's probably not gonna do anything.
No, I think, do folks understand what I'm saying?
Am I not understanding?
I do, except the fact is, I'm wondering, are we gonna read all the process, 600 whatever pages?
Well, that's up to you, Herman. That's your decision. Why are you asking me? That's up to you. You gotta read what you think is relevant for you.
Yeah, watch the webinar
Yeah,
that's on the website.
Right, so
Yeah,
listen to
that's
what I'm
what-
saying, let me just say it again. George told us that if we wanted to submit comments now, we could. I think it could have been for content, it could have also been for the structure of how they're making the proposal itself. It doesn't really matter because whether we send it in next week or in 2 weeks, it's gonna be weighed in the same way because at this stage, they're not going to change the document that they're having us look at. You get it?
So
It's the document.
Yeah.
They're not going to change the document, but what they still want from us, maybe not as a committee necessarily, is our comments on the content. The
That's in
proposal.
December.
That's right, that's the community, but that's a vote.
That's a ULURP.
Right, but that's a vote, so do we submit comments? We don't submit comments when we vote, is that correct?
Sure we do.
All right.
What I'm saying is I understand that. My second, other part to that was if we just concentrate on the portion of the document that affects.
Right, it's not
Okay.
all gonna affect us, and you could have different people read different sections. And I go back to your comments, when you vote on the ULURP, you can vote yes, you can vote no, you can vote yes with conditions, which are your comments, you can vote no with conditions, which are your comments.
All right, so.
I think what you're suggesting, if you don't mind if I say something, is you want well-reasoned comments as opposed to random comments, is that?
What I'm suggesting is, I think, not possible, actually, because I was responding to the invitation for us to submit comments. but at the stage, it wasn't relevant, and we were trying to make it happen within a timely fashion. All that I'm saying is that if we want to submit comments, if they would be considered, and if this board, if procedurally that is appropriate for this committee to continue, even though we're gonna have a vote to submit comments, then we should do that in the way in which John just mentioned, in a more well-reasoned, thought-out process, because we have more time. That's all I'm saying. But if in December, when we vote, they expect a resolution or additional comments officially from the community board,
Yes.
then we don't have to do that. We can just work now to prepare so that we can be ready for that, for those comments that we would be submitting, or a resolution as a full board in general. Does that make sense? Does
Got it.
everybody understand that?
Got it.
All right.
In
so-
essence, we can also make ad hoc comments next
And you can do
next
whatever
month.
you want.
No, I mean, next month they'll be here. So if we say things in theory,
That's
they're.
true. So they're taking your input when we have a
Right.
discussion. That's
When they come, you can make, but if you want to put official comments that you are written and into the record for them to consider and make actual changes to their proposal, then that would be done as a community board in December. Individually, I encourage you all to read the document and do that, because I'm also gonna ask you all to read the parts, as Herman said, that are relevant for us, so that when we are weighing in on this, we are not just rubber stamping this because it's too overwhelming. We're never gonna get to all of it, but we can get to some parts of it. I don't even know what it looks like to even make this recommendation, but I'm willing to really work with Susan for a minute to look at it, and then, we could maybe recommend a process, or people can decide now who wants to work to read through some of it, and start to identify some of the questions. Or we can just let the process be guided by the questions that we submit to Susan and take it from there.
That part I go for.
All right,
Me too, that's fine.
all right. So read it, send your questions, and then if anything is glaring at us, we'll know, and we'll figure it out. We've got some time. All right?
Well, I think one thing we definitely want to do is make intelligent comments in December, because the reality is that this legislation could face lawsuits, and you could actually get a new administration come in that is the city of no. So things might change. So I think if the community comes out with a strong voice to say like,
That's the
hey,
point I'm making. That's what
city
I'm
of yes in this
suggesting.
case is totally wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying anything different. Am I saying
Right.
anything
No, I understand.
different? You have to
No, I
agree?
don't think so.
All right. So I think I'm saying the same thing, and it's up to us but right now, I think everyone is tired and nobody is willing to make a decision.
Right.
about how to move forward. So I presented the options, all right? Go back. What we do is gonna be largely up to you as committee members. I can only, there's a saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink. I don't even know how much time I can give this, but I'm gonna do my due diligence as much as I can to read what I need to, and send your questions, and then we'll pick this up in November at this committee and see if we've come up with anything that we wanna start to gel together as a comment document that would officially come out from the board. If it's not a resolution, or to be included with a resolution if that's permissible as well.
We've been there.
Well, that's what you usually do.
We've
Usually
been
have,
there before.
you're gonna support it or not support it, but we always do with conditions, and that could be, we did that in 2008 with the rezoning. and
But
we
who
have-
does the work of compiling all those conditions? That's
You
us,
guys.
right? So that's the point. Get your questions in, read the document, point out the glaring issues, send them to Susan so that we can start to have something to work with. Otherwise, we don't really know what we're commenting on, and we don't give ourselves enough opportunity to digest what each one of us is putting forward.
I
Right?
will also try and get draft resos from them and have them.
Okay, perfect. That's good to, yeah. So, all right, anything
In
else?
theory, George is still gonna make more comments to us, or?
Well, he's under contract to spend up to a certain amount. So, if we want to say, give him comments and ask him to draft them, we can do that.
That would be great.
Yeah.
But then we need to give time to do that.
So just procedurally, could it be the kind of thing that we could say, this use group and this is our concern, and then he will, massage that and wordsmith it
I think
and
so.
draw upon the necessary text to make it a more valiant, relevant point.
I
In
think
our
what I
comment.
should do is ask him what he's doing with the other boards.
Okay, and let us know.
also ask him how we should do that with him. you know.
Okay, so ask him and then let us know. So are we good, everyone? Any glaring questions? Anybody have, any spinach pies left over there?
Yes. So we need to finish the priorities.
All right, so let's, go to the priorities.
And Susan, this deck, he'll share it with us.
Oh, okay. What?
The deck that he presented, that'll be shared after this meeting.
The video?
Something
else.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
At this point.
And I'll put that on the website.
Just voting on accepting it
We're
because
paying
we already
to do this stuff, so it's
Right.
Okay.
All right, so we're going back to voting on our budget priorities for the district needs statement and the district needs statement. Susan took us through these.
I suggest we go to the bottom.
Right, and we were, when we left off, we were talking about these last recommendations. And we landed on that we could be vague about it, but with some, clarifying language, but we don't have to list everything under the sun. Is that?
Yeah.
Did everybody get that same interpretation? Okay. And then the next possible new one was the vacant readiness program under NYCHA. So unless anyone has additional budget priorities that they want us to consider, questions about any of these that are on here, I think, can we?
Well, when you say
what's the process
additional,
now?
we don't usually do that because there's no time to research.
All right, so then you can't add anything additional.
Right. We could have done that if.
But if you have any questions or you think that something shouldn't be on here, now is your time to say that. Alistair. And then hurry
Are
up.
we talking about the old ones or the new ones?
What we have on the screen in total.
Okay.
So you need to decide whether you want to keep those old ones or not, or reorder them.
I'm okay with the old ones.
Well, these are what we worked on for 3 months, though, right? Earlier this year.
No, those are from last year.
Oh, that's last year.
I'm good with the old ones. I'm good with the second and third new ones. My comment on the first one is I prefer funding to go directly to tenants in need. Over 80% of what are classified as eviction proceedings in housing court are for non-payments. That's the majority. And that indicates that tenants are having problems paying rent. That's the main, over 80% of eviction proceedings are non-payments. So
The eviction program, the anti-eviction program is under HRA now, so that's voted, I don't know if it.
But the problem in housing court is there is no way for most tenants to get one-shot deals or funding without first going to housing court. And that's problematic.
That's not true, actually, Alistair.
In most cases.
It's not true, it's not true, it's not true. You can get a one-shot deal without going to housing court.
Not
You
from what I
can.
know.
I'm a housing counselor and
Are you
organizer, I'm
suggesting
telling
a
you.
totally new?
As long as you have a
Are you
reason.
suggesting something totally?
I'm just saying, is there a way to structure it so the funding goes
No, you're talking about a different program.
directly to
You're talking about a different
to the
program.
tenants?
You're talking about a different program that I don't even know where that funding comes from.
So can we just clarify? Because I think,
Yeah.
right, these are capital needs, right?
No,
Mostly
the-
expense and capital, right?
Yes, the new ones are.
What Alistair, you're saying is that you rather that resources for preservation not go to directly go to people to pay their rent versus.
No, preservation, the money would go to the organizations.
Okay, that's,
Well,
that's what that's what
Right.
generally happens.
But the organizations have capital expenses within them.
They're not
That's
capital.
No, they're
No,
it's just
expense.
program for
They're
staffing.
expense, it would be program.
Right, but that program.
Which would be services to do anti-eviction prevention.
Right, but if you're giving $1 million to the programs, that $1 million does not end up in tenants' pockets.
Right, but somebody
I'm
has to
saying-
administer the program.
These are programs these do go to organizations. The preservation.
But he's
does-
talking about, you're talking about money. Money goes to organizations for a variety of things. Everyone is different, every program is different when it comes to the preservation world. Some of it will be program money for staffing, to run the program, and
Right.
some of it will be resources to help with financial sometimes, with financial needs. These programs though, outside of major programs like ERAP, which are actually run by the state, they don't do rent arrears in that way, and there are other programs like the Bridge Fund and the One Shot Deal that do that. But I see what you're saying, but I don't know, can we say that?
No, we're talking there about a different, I see that you're saying it's under preservation. What you're talking about is something we would need to research and figure out what agency, where the money comes from. Are they using federal money? Because we're only talking about city money. And what I'm saying is you're bringing up something totally new, which of course is good, but I don't have any information on that.
We're not, like you said earlier, at this point, anything that we change, add to this, Oscar, like Susan says, has to be researched by her and then, add it. And it's just, this is like at a final stage now, so we even have to.
Can we say something like preservation programs for services and resources? Can you say something like that,
It's
does it matter?
It's totally vague. It doesn't matter. If you're putting money into the program, it's gonna go to whatever that program is contracted to do, whether it's organizing
That's right.
tenants, whether it's going to court with them.
Does that help with what you're
Whether
saying?
it's helping finding code violations and following up to get violations cured, which preserves the housing, right? They're all important.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of tenants in need financially, and unfortunately, our experience or the industry's experience, and I'd like to talk to you later about which programs do kick in before housing court is, they all start once you go to housing court. And that's
not true at all.
It's not true.
These programs are not after they're in housing court. These are,
So they'll give money to tenants to pay rent.
no, it
prior
gives,
to-
no,
prior
it
to
gives
housing court?
money to,
No, I'm asking about paying tenants to pay their rent.
I don't know.
Not
that-
organizing.
I-
It
I can-
typically
I
is
can't-
when they're in housing. It
Yeah.
happens because I work with that. I refer people to say Universal Settlement. They have a program where
Right.
they pay stuff, but they also give money
To pay rent.
to pay rent.
Right, will they do that before the tenants in housing court?
Yes.
There
So
are
I'd like to know
organizations
those, because that's.
There's so many, you have to
So
do that
many,
research
so
on your own,
many.
Allison.
There's loads, yeah.
You have to,
Give
right now,
me a list, because.
I saw my job.
No, no, no.
Yes, let's
No,
go to
no,
the
no,
next
no.
few hours.
I'm
Write down,
Me too.
we're trying to vote on the priorities.
So Allison, I'm happy to talk about it with
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
but all, I think we're just saying is,
Okay.
whatever the program is, that's what we're saying.
Alistair,
Yeah.
I'm resident association president.
Okay.
Can I make one quick comment?
Yes.
So Susan had commented that we might want to actually move around the priorities. And I actually think it's important to put forward the vacant readiness program for a couple of reasons. A, it's something they could actually get done. B, it will actually do something to create more affordable housing in a sense because they turn over faster. And C, NYCHA will get more money sooner because they're not vacant.
So you wanna put that as number one?
I want to put it higher on the list. I don't know.
Alright,
Oh, thank you.
alright, so
Yeah,
just
because it's such a, I mean,
procedurally then, so to go with what John is saying, and to follow up on what these are the recommendations, right? We are asking whether anybody has a problem with any of these, Alistair made his comments. about what he thinks. Now, the next part that John is pushing us towards is ranking. So we wanna have a conversation about ranking these priorities now. So Ariana was next, John, so you put your proposal on the floor, but she has comments.
Yeah, I just actually had a question about the vacant readiness program. I think you mentioned it's a pilot program. Could you speak a little bit more on like how it reduces the turnover time? And also like, do we know at any given moment on average, how many apartments are empty because of turnover?
I've actually been, I don't have it right offhand, I mean, it's actually been in the Times, there's been a lot about it in the Times. But I don't have it offhand, but the reduction in time, I remember, was pretty drastic.
And what exactly does the program do in order to reduce the turnover? Okay, that's, okay.
I don't know, but I do know it is it is implemented and it has reduced time. Right now, it's gone up to over a year normally without this program.
Okay.
I just have quick clarifying questions. One is the number of priorities that we max can do is 27?
So there's they used to have a definite number, now they're saying about. So there's about 25 expense if you go over for the whole board. And I'm gonna tell you, the bottom ones are always knocked off.
Okay.
For capital, there's 40, we never get up to 40, you can
Okay.
put all the capital in you want.
Okay, and then my second question was just very quickly, inspectors, I'm assuming this is HPD inspectors.
I'm sorry, I should say HPD inspector.
Okay, and I also agree with John about the vacant readiness program.
All right, any other discussion, any other recommendations to move any of these recommendations up on the list or down on the list?
I don't have a one to move down, but I do think that the HPD inspectors one is valuable.
So so we have, just so that I'm clear, we all heard, we have two right now, right? That we want to move the order of. One is the vacant readiness program and the other one is the HPD inspectors. And if we're leaving it in possible new, how does that work, Susan?
If we're what?
If it's a new recommendation, they all just get put together, right?
You're putting one, yeah, you're
Right,
making two
that's just for
one
our
expense.
purposes.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
All right, so of those two, both of them are vacancies, right? So, I mean, I think, how do folks feel about, leaving them in, not in that order, but the HPD vacancy recommendation ranking higher than the night shift vacancy? I'm gonna tell you why I'm saying that, because I know that inspectors in HPD are like difficult to come by. So I don't know, Steve, do you agree with me?
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely, I mean, we're calling 311, I mean, to get an inspector out to their apartment, it's pretty crucial if they have serious violations, so.
The only thing here would be that they have 18 in Manhattan, but how many would that be a vacancy in our district exactly?
It does, it wouldn't be, they don't go by district, they go.
Okay, just goes
By borough, by borough.
It'll be Manhattan.
Right.
I mean, the other issue is it's very hard to hire people.
Right.
That's the other issue.
That's what I was gonna ask, like, even if we put that higher on the list, how much of that is even controlled by,
It's both, I mean, it's funding to hire people, it's funding to pay them enough to get them to apply, and then it's also, all the agencies are having difficulty hiring.
All right, so folks, it is 9:15 and it doesn't seem like there's any major objection to any of these recommendations. It doesn't seem like there's any major new recommendations that, even though we can't really add them anyway, because we haven't researched them. So it's really just about ranking, and it looks like by the level of conversation that we're only really looking to move two of these up on the list. And so we would do Manhattan HPD first. And then vacant readiness, but do we see them as number one on top or just higher in the list? Yes, Alistair.
I go with what John said, and I would rank the vacant apartments on top of the HPD ones. I think that's gonna provide immediate results in providing more housing, which is critical.
Yeah, it's
And
something.
so
that can
where
be
do you guys
implemented.
wanna put it on the list? Are you recommending, can you please tell me if you're asking it to be
You have to
number
say a
one?
number where you want.
Just go to the bottom.
Yeah, I don't know what the other ones are.
Okay.
Oh, we only have two, right? Is there
You
something?
only have two, yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's fine, only two.
Because
But we have to
expenses
decide
separate.
whether we agree with the existing order of the list, which is how it was ranked in the past, right? And the Gibbon climate, and if we're okay with the list and the order, then we just gotta decide where to put the two new ones.
How come it started at 18?
So Carl's gonna just take us, he's gonna show them to us in a sec, okay?
We'll do the capital stuff, let's just do the expense.
Okay, so that's an expense. That's the current order right now. 18 is the first, 19 is the second, and then under possible new, it would be number one, Manhattan HPD number two. So let's, oh wait, that's the same thing there. No, it's not increased funding for staffing grant, no, sorry. Okay,
I put it number one. I'm just suggesting.
yeah, right, so we have a proposal to put in the NYCHA vacancy program as number one under expenses. Do we have any objections to that?
No.
He said the NYCHA one. He wants to put
The housing.
both John
Yeah.
and Alistair are recommending that the NYCHA vacancy readiness program be ranked number one. All right, so that would be above 18. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Above 18? All right,
Yes.
so,
Number one above.
yeah, so that would be number one.
The we do is show, it show everything
Right.
down, that's all it
Right,
does.
so, and then the Manhattan HPD, do we want that as number two, or do we want that as in between 18, 19, or after? Does anybody care either way? Otherwise, we'll leave it at the end.
Pick a number.
I think at the end makes
At
sense.
the end.
All right, so then we're good. We have our, and the preservation, programs.
You don't need to include it.
We don't
So,
need to?
One thing I should tell you is that what happens is that we take all the committees and we collate them.
Right.
And your ranking is never changed. But what you have as number 7 will always be before your number 8.
Right.
But it could be number 20. when
Right,
it's
on the
collated.
major, on the big list, this, yeah.
And what
So these
hap-
numbers won't remain the same, but our lists will show up in the same order.
Right. And because there's so many expense, what's ever at the bottom, a few will drop off.
Yeah. Okay, so if we are we going to include preservation programs as number 5? Or are we gonna leave it off?
What really is off?
That's what Susan said, we didn't have to include
We don't
it.
have to include it.
Well,
I mean, it's
Let's
totally up
include
to
it,
you.
it doesn't, it's fine, if it makes it, it makes it, we hope it makes it. So are we okay with this order for expense?
Yes.
Do we need to vote, should we now go to capital and then vote on it all at once?
But every district needs it, everything all at once.
All right, so now let's go to the capital part.
This was the order you had last
This
year.
is the order we had, and there's no new capital recommendations other than what's on
Oh,
here.
you know what? That Rafael Hernandez shouldn't be in yours. That was, a senior,
Okay, so take that out.
Yeah, I can take that out.
So how many do we have here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 capital. And this is the order in which they will appear, not necessarily using that same number, but they will, like, in rank, they will always come in that order. Are there any?
I suggest we keep them where they are.
All right, so we have we want to keep them, everybody else? We're just doing straw poll right now, kind of, okay?
Yeah, it's all good.
All right, so since we're good, let's go back now. Let's vote on everything, folks. I need a motion on the floor.
I just want to point out a grammatical error in
Yes.
page 2, where the third paragraph down. It says community-based organizations in CD3. It should say which provide essential, I wrote it in here.
Oh, okay,
that's
just
fine.
give it to us.
Which provide essential services, blah, blah, need expanded support, because it didn't make
Okay.
sense. Otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So, all right, so we are doing 3 things,
Yeah,
okay? Well, really 2, but we are voting in support of the district needs statement. We are voting in support of the current budget, capital and expense priorities that are being put before us. And so I'm just gonna leave it that way, and so that the rank and all of that is just included. Once you vote for the budget and the expense and capital priorities, the way we presented it, and the ranking will be the same, so we don't have to vote on that separately. All right, so I need a motion.
Motion to approve.
I need a second. All in favor?
alright.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Is there a ghost here? All right, so the motion has passed. And so these are the budget priorities that will be moving forward, and we support the district needs statement. And just to reiterate our homework, do your best to read through your stuff, get your questions together. Try to send them to Susan before next month, by when?
Let's say 2 weeks.
All right, try to send them 2 weeks if you can, your questions, so that she gets a chance to send them to DCP, so that they have an opportunity to look at the questions and come up with answers. And then our next meeting, we don't have a date yet, so I did want to say a few housekeeping things.
What are we gonna do?
So there was a question that came through from some of the committee members regarding the date of the week or the order in which the meeting happens. So, Susan, the housing committee meeting happens the second week or the third week? It's the second week.
So we don't do, what we do is the full board is the 4th Tuesday, and then we work back. So the date we actually have for November, because we always do this way, is the 15th, which is a Wednesday.
November 15th is a Wednesday.
It's unusual because of Thanksgiving,
So we usually do Tuesdays.
Yeah, we used to.
Right?
Yeah.
We used to do Wednesdays, then we went to Tuesdays, now we're moving back, and so I do wanna flag this, because when I was a committee member, this was a big issue for me. The changing of dates, because my schedule is crazy and I need consistency, and I can imagine that everybody on this committee needs that as well.
So for December, it was actually for a Tuesday. Sometimes it's just because of holidays.
Okay.
So that was, you have 1, 2, 3 holidays in November, that's why. But you can decide, I mean, you should decide what your preferred date is, and then that way.
How far in advance can we go?
About 2, well, you can decide that, like, you wanna be Tuesday or Wednesday, and then we'll just schedule that throughout, except when there is something like holidays.
Right. So then if we need to make a change, like we made a change, because I don't remember why we had to make this change, but we had to make this change. In that moment where people are expecting, they're not expecting that change, and we make that change, what can we do to include the committee and make sure?
So I have the calendars at the exec committee for the next 2 months. So you will know like 2 months in advance. And so you see the calendar, and you can, just email the committee.
So we're not gonna have a regular date, it's just gonna be.
No, we're saying that you will, except when there's holidays or something that interferes.
Right.
So just so that we're clear, it'll be Tuesdays.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But our next meeting is Wednesday, all right? But then in December, it'll be Tuesday, is that correct?
Correct.
And we will try to do it on Tuesdays unless there's a change. And just so that we know, when we work backwards, full board is fourth
Tuesday.
Fourth
And we work
Tuesday.
back from that.
So we try to go, then if that's the fourth Tuesday, we go to the second Tuesday, right? Because that helps too, for me, like to know more or less, because It's very difficult sometimes. I get requests for meetings in advance. I'm like, I don't know, it's a Wednesday, it's a Tuesday, I never know what to
Well, we
say.
can, I mean, if it will help, we could just fill out the calendars, I mean, Ed does that, and I could just have maybe do like 6 months.
That would be helpful. Yeah, I mean, if we could do that, and it's not too much of an inconvenience, that way this committee, I really want to make sure that we're promoting in every possible way attendance, and removing any barriers to people participating. And if scheduling is something, it seems like a low lift for us to come together and figure that out. So Tuesdays, but next month, it is Wednesday.
Okay.
Okay, and it will always be the second Tuesday if it falls within the ranking of the fourth, which is when the full board meetings, right?
You have to vote to adjourn?
All right, and that's, we
Yeah,
we gotta
roll
go
call.
to adjourn.
Yeah,
Oh, we
roll call.
gotta do a roll call.
I can go ahead.
Please do,
Damiris?
just do it.
And,
Alistair?
Yes.
how are you gonna?
Andrea?
Yes.
Herman?
Yes.
Trevor? Laura Lugo? Jamie? Yes. Sandra?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Megan? Anisha?
Great.
Thank you.
How are you gonna do the minutes? I wanna make sure I get them in time.
She can send them to.
Do you want, so that's what I want. Do you want her to send it to you? Do you wanna, so this is what, then you send them to me and send them to the rest of the committee, BCC.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, so our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We covered a lot of ground tonight, and we got out a little later than we
Saved all the
expected, but
lists, right?
thank you, Alistair, for the
You
finish
saved the
lines.
priorities.
Did you finish them?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't take
yeah.
them home.
So isn't George amazing?
George is good.
Yeah, that was very useful, that George. Steve.
No, just go over what you're doing.
At some point, I'd love to know. For, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And how they.